Chapter 3347. Chapter 342. Chapter 342. Like a mad dog boom. The moment the black-robed swordsman appeared, the void suddenly sank and a terrifying pressure was released, causing people's hearts to tremble uncontrollably. The crowd's eyes froze, then locked onto the black-robed swordsman, their faces full of shock. Who is he? He's so powerful. His sword intent is so terrifying, it seems to be as fast as an expert like Wang Jian. He's so young, could he be the legendary Sword Star? Sword Star, who is that? Rumor has it that all swordsmen who enter the Sky Sword Marshal can become Sword Stars if they are strong and talented. Sword Stars have a very special position in the Sky Sword Marshal. They don't need to mine sword intent, they only need to cultivate. I heard that Sword Stars can even use sword crystals. Using sword crystals. No wonder this person's sword principle is so terrifying. The crowd discussed, one after another, looking at the black-robed swordsman with jealousy, admiration, and fear. They were right, this black-robed swordsman was a sword star, and the dozens of swordsmen behind him were also sword stars. The so-called sword stars were the stars of swords. Just as one of them said, sword stars were swordsmen chosen by the guardians of the Sky Sword Marshal and specially trained. Anyone who could enter the Sky Sword Marshal could be said to be a genius in sword principle, and sword stars were geniuses among geniuses. Sword stars didn't mind sword intent, they only focused on cultivation, and they could also enjoy sword crystals. With such a superior cultivation environment and outstanding talent, the Sword Star's sword Dao strength was generally much higher than that of ordinary swordsmen. The black-robed swordsman who stepped out looked very young, probably under 10,000 years old, but his sword principle realm was close to that of an expert like Wang Jian. One should know that there were only a few dozen Wang Jian in the entire Sky Sword Marshal. Nie Tian looked at the black-robed swordsman, the corners of his mouth twitching, and murmured, "The transcendent esoteric realm, at his age, he is indeed very strong to have reached such a realm." The black-robed swordsman deliberately released sword momentum, making everyone mistakenly think that he was very strong. He was indeed strong, but he was far from being strong to the point of being breathtaking. The black-robed swordsman was only at the transcendent, profound realm. He was much weaker than Wang Jian Yang Sun, who was at the second heaven of sword rhyme. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he felt strange. Why would the black-robed swordsman come looking for him directly? He did not know the black-robed swordsman at all. He had never seen him before, but the latter had an aggressive look on his face. His eyes were sharp and fierce, as if he wanted to devour someone. "Who is Nie Tian? Show yourself." At this moment, the figure of the black-robed swordsman approached the crowd. With a low roar, his aura was domineering, and the sword intent around him was violent. "Nie Tian, this person is a sword star. He is very strong. We don't need to care about him." Mo Qianjun, who was behind Nie Tian, frowned and said in a low voice. He did not see the scene of Nie Tian killing Yang Sun and fighting to a draw with the Sixth Sky, so he was not clear about Nie Tian's real combat strength. In his opinion, Nie Tian's strength should be similar to that of the Thousand Swords, far from Wang Jian's level. The black-robed swordsman's aura was very strong, close to Wang Jian's strength. Therefore, he advised Nie Tian to ignore this person. "It doesn't matter. I'll just fight him and see what he wants." Nie Tian, on the other hand, faintly smiled. With a carefree look, he took a step forward and hovered in midair. He calmly looked at the black-robed swordsman and slightly raised his eyebrows in a provocative manner. "I am Nie Tian. Who are you?" "You are Nie Tian." The black-robed swordsman's eyes darkened and locked onto Nie Tian. He sneered and said, "My name is Liang Chao, a sword star under Master Sixth Sky. I'm ranked 88th on the sword ranking in the sky." Liang Chao was very arrogant. He stared at Nie Tian with his nose in the air and sneered, "I heard that you challenged Master Yang Sun and killed him. You even fought to a draw with Master Sixth Sky. I'd like to see how strong you are, the swordfish who killed Wan Jian and leveled the sky. Nie Tian squinted his eyes and said with an awkward smile, So, you're going to challenge me? It had been more than 20 days since the incident that Liang Chao mentioned. The news of the sword marshals in the sky had long spread. Everyone was saying that a peerless swordsman had appeared in the sword marshals in the sky. He killed Wan Jian as a swordfish and even fought to a draw with the Sixth Sky. In an instant, Nie Tian's fame skyrocketed and he was in the limelight. Apparently, this sword star named Liang Chao wasn't convinced of Nie Tian's superiority and wanted to elevate his own status. It was a pity that Nie Tian was far more powerful than he had imagined. Challenge? Liang Chao sneered at Nie Tian's words and said, Who do you think you are to make me challenge you? You're just a swordsman with a transcendent sword body. Are you sure you can take a blow from me? Nie Tian smiled again. The corner of his mouth moved slightly as he said, So, you don't want to challenge me? You're a genius that I can't afford to provoke. I'll just hide from you. But please don't scream like a mad dog here and pollute my ears. With that, Nie Tian turned around and was about to leave. Who are you calling a mad dog, brat? Liang Chao was stunned at first, but then he reacted and roared. The sword essence all over his body burst out like a surging wave, crashing into the void. It was extremely terrifying. He was a dignified swordfish, an expert ranked 88th on the Sky Sword ranking. How could he not be angry when Nie Tian insulted him like a mad dog? Nie Tian froze for a moment before saying with a faint smile, not the slightest bit intimidated, Whoever barks the loudest is a mad dog. You're courting death. Liang Chao was thoroughly enraged. With a loud roar, a long sword appeared in his hand, and he thrust it forward madly. Wherever the sword passed, flames would appear. In the blink of an eye, a sea of flames spread out in the air, pressing down on Nie Tian. In my opinion, you're the one who's courting death. Nie Tianling laughed. A gush of sword essence gushed out from his palm and instantly tore the flame apart, heading straight for Liang Chao. Seeing the flame in front of him suddenly burst, Liang Chao screamed in horror and panic. Puff! In the next instant, he felt a sharp ray of light flying toward him, followed by a burning pain on his face. Asshole! You've left a scar on my face. Liang Chao's pupils contracted as he reacted immediately. He became enraged and roared like a monkey. He did not expect Nie Tian to leave a scar on his face with a casual attack. The humiliation of a sword scar was the most direct and deepest insult to a swordsman. He could not believe that Nie Tian dared to humiliate him like this. At that instant, everyone's gaze froze and locked onto Liang Chao's face, staring at the glaring sword scar. Their gazes landed mercilessly on Liang Chao's face like a slap to the face. His body was boiling with anger. His eyes turned bloodshot and his body trembled uncontrollably, as if he was about to go berserk. Chapter 33-48. Chapter 343 Ranking of Swords Boom. Liang Chao glared at Nie Tian with eyes that were spitting fire. The sword aura around his body rumbled and roared, looking extremely terrifying. However, Nie Tian remained calm and said with a smile, Some people just want me to slap them. If I don't slap them, wouldn't I be embarrassing you? You! Liang Chao roared. He wanted to say something, but he felt as if there was a huge rock pressing down on his chest, making him unable to make a sound. I advise you to calm down. Nie Tian smiled and said, If you attack again, someone will die. Liang Chao's eyes trembled. He felt suffocated, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. How could he not hear the threat in Nie Tian's words? He was arrogant, but he was not stupid. Just now, Nie Tian's casual sword aura had torn apart his fiery sword aura, making him realize that he was no match for Nie Tian. After all, Nie Tian hadn't even drawn his sword yet. Liang Chao could not understand why a swordsman with the ultimate sword physique was so terrifying. Nie Tian's sword aura was much stronger than Liang Chao's. Furthermore, his understanding and control of the sword aura were way above Liang Chao's, so it was normal for him to crush Liang Chao. Sword Star, the genius on the sky ranking of swords is a mess. Nie Tianling laughed. He ignored Liang Chao and turned around to leave. He was already very kind to Liang Chao by only humiliating him. With his strength, he could easily kill Liang Chao with a single move. If he wanted to kill someone, Liang Chao would have been a corpse by now. Liang Chao's eyes trembled. He was unwilling to accept this, but he did not dare to attack Nie Tian again. Nie Tian's aura was too strong and domineering, making him fearful. If he dared to attack again, Nie Tian would really kill him. At this time, everyone's gazes shifted to Nie Tian. They were shocked. Nie Tian's strength had actually reached such a terrifying level. "Your name is Nie Tian, right?" At this moment, a deep voice sounded out all of a sudden. Following this, a figure appeared in the sky. Nie Tian felt a chill on his back, causing him to stop in his tracks. He turned around to look. The person who appeared in front of him was a green-clothed swordsman. His figure was tall and straight, and he had a handsome appearance. His entire person seemed to emit a fierce and extremely sharp aura. However, this person's eyes seemed to be very gloomy, giving him an extra evil aura. "What can I do for you?" Nie Tian smiled faintly. His soul consciousness moved slightly, and he was quite surprised. Although the green-clothed swordsman was deliberately restraining himself, he could still feel that the former sword essence was extremely powerful and was not any weaker than Yang Sun's. This undoubtedly showed that this green-clothed swordsman was a swordsman who had stepped into the saint realm of the sword Dao. The green-robed swordsman looked very young, even younger than Liang Chao. To have such strength at such a young age, it was enough to show how talented he was in the sword Dao. "You once fought to a draw with the sixth sky. Is that true?" The green-clothed swordsman's eyes were like needles as he stared at Nie Tian, making Nie Tian feel very uncomfortable. "What does that have to do with you?" Nie Tian frowned and replied coldly. "My name is Lu Yun, a disciple of the sixth sky. If you fought to a draw with my master, I'd like to know if you're a match for me," Lu Yun said in a deep voice, his eyes filled with killing intent. "Lu Yun. He's Lu Yun." The crowd suddenly became excited and exclaimed when they heard Lu Yun's words. Nie Tian frowned and could not help but laugh. It seemed that this Lu Yun was a famous swordsman in the sky. However, there was one thing that surprised Nie Tian: Lu Yun was a disciple of the sixth sky. At this moment, the crowd became even more excited and began to discuss among themselves. "Oh my God, so he's Lu Yun. He's indeed the disciple of the sixth sky. He's so strong. I heard that Lu Yun is a swordsman ranked 9th on the Sky Sword leaderboard. He's deliberately restraining his sword will, but he's still so strong. Lu Yun is looking for Nie Tian. This is going to be a great show for the disciple to avenge his master's humiliation." Many people's eyes lit up. They were obviously looking forward to the battle between Nie Tian and Lu Yun. Not only was Lu Yun a disciple of the sixth sky, but he was also ranked 9th on the Sky Sword leaderboard. One could imagine how strong he was. The Sky Sword leaderboard was a list of young swordsmen in the Sky Sword leaderboard who were under 10,000 years old. Swordsmen who were able to enter the Sky Sword leaderboard were all monstrous swordsmen who were 1 in a million. Take Liang Chao for example. Although he was only ranked 88th on the Sky Sword leaderboard, his sword principal realm had already reached the amazing god-surpassing ultimacy realm. However, he had provoked the even more monstrous Nie Tian, so he was completely defeated. Lu Yun was ranked 9th on the Sky Sword leaderboard. Liang Chao could not compare to him at all. Monstrous swordsmen like him were all arrogant people. His master, the sixth sky, had actually fought to a draw with Nie Tian. This undoubtedly made him feel humiliated. Although Nie Tian had displayed amazing combat strength, he was still not worthy of Lu Yun's attention. Today, whether it was to avenge his master's humiliation or to prove his strength, he had to defeat Nie Tian. Are you looking down on me or Lord Sixth Sky by being so arrogant? Nie Tian looked at Lu Yun and smiled slightly, but it was very provocative. You! Lu Yun's eyes darkened. He was momentarily speechless by Nie Tian's question. In any case, Nie Tian and the Sixth Sky had fought to a draw. Wasn't Lu Yun looking down on Nie Tian the same as looking down on the Sixth Sky? Nie Tian, don't try to win with words. Lu Yun's face darkened. He released an extremely sharp aura from his body and said in a cold voice, "If you are a real swordsman, then fight me." Is this a challenge? Nie Tian's lips twitched, his calm eyes filled with mockery. Yes, Lu Yun roared. The calmer Nie Tian was, the angrier he became. He said directly, "Nie Tian, do you dare to accept my challenge?" The crowd trembled when they heard Lu Yun's words. They all looked at Nie Tian, clearly hoping that Nie Tian would accept the challenge. One was the legend of Wan Jian, who was promoted from a swordfish, and the other was a demon-like genius who was ranked 9th on the sword list of the sky. If these two were to fight, it would be very exciting. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and a strange smile appeared on his face. Lu Yun's strength was far beyond Liang Chao's. If this battle started, he might have to use some tricks to win. The sword seal in the sky had already been activated, and Nie Tian did not want to reveal his strength too early. Moreover, Lu Yun was a disciple of the Sixth Sky. He did not want to fight this person. Nie Tian, are you afraid? Lu Yun laughed cold when he saw that Nie Tian did not answer. He said arrogantly, "So the person who killed Yang Sun and fought to a draw with the Sixth Sky is a coward." Ha! His laughter immediately caused the crowd to roar with laughter. Everyone looked at Nie Tian with obvious disdain in their eyes. If that's the case, I have no choice but to fight. Nie Tian frowned and shook his head with a bitter smile. Chapter 3349. Boy Nie, I, Lu Yun, would like to see what kind of ability you, a super divine sword body, have to fight to a draw with my teacher. Lu Yun growled. His eyes were filled with a murderous glint as he condensed his sword will around his body, releasing a majestic aura. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. Lu Yun's sword will aura was no weaker than Yang Sun's. In fact, it was even more terrifying. At such a young age, Lu Yun had already reached the Saint Realm. One could imagine how talented he was in swordsmanship. At this moment, Lu Yun was indeed a Saint Realm swordsman. Moreover, his swordsmanship had reached the 3rd sky of sword charm, making him slightly stronger than Yang Sun. The crowd could feel the sword will fluctuations released by Lu Yun's sword will and could not help but tremble. This Lu Yun is indeed very strong. Such a terrifying sword will, I'm afraid he has already reached the sword charm realm. This guy named Nie Tian is definitely no match for Lu Yun. I think he will be killed by Lord Lu Yun in one move. Nie Tian will definitely lose, but Lu Yun may not dare to kill him. After all, he is now Wan Jian and is highly regarded by Lord Sixth Sky. The crowd discussed among themselves. They all believed that Nie Tian would definitely not be a match for Lu Yun. Lu Yun was very famous and was no less famous than Wan Jian. Although Nie Tian had fought to a draw with Sixth Sky, everyone knew that Sixth Sky had suppressed his swordsmanship realm. Therefore, even if it was a draw, it was not surprising. They even felt that Sixth Sky, who had suppressed his realm, was nothing to be afraid of. However, Nie Tian knew that an expert like Sixth Sky, even if he had suppressed his realm, his battle strength was still very terrifying. After all, some things, such as the comprehension of sword will, could not be suppressed. Boy, I, Lu Yun, only need one move to defeat you. At this moment, Lu Yun opened his mouth. His voice was cold and domineering, and his eyes were full of disdain. It was obvious that he did not take Nie Tian seriously. Is that so? Nie Tian laughed and said disdainfully, "Then, great prodigy Lu, please use your sword." Courting death. When Lu Yun heard Nie Tian's sarcasm, he was instantly enraged. The Yuan spirit's sword appeared in his hand and the 9 heavens cloud howl appeared. A violent and murderous sword intent immediately gathered on the sword, causing the surrounding void to stagnate. Hua! In the next moment, Lu Yun stabbed out with his sword. The tip of his sword pierced through the air and a sword shadow appeared. It carried the will of lightning and water, and it whistled through the air with extreme sharpness. Although Lu Yun was incomparably arrogant, he was not the least bit careless. Instead, he placed great importance on Nie Tian and went all out with his sword. As a disciple of the sixth sky, he naturally knew how powerful the sixth sky was. The fact that Nie Tian could fight sixth sky to a draw was enough to prove his strength. QL11 Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and the corners of his mouth twitched. As it turned out, Lu Yun was a dual attribute swordsman. Amidst the lightning, there was a hint of weak water. While his sword aura was vigorous and continuous, it also carried a violent and surging intent. Lu Yun's control over his sword intent was extremely terrifying. He had almost perfectly fused the violence of thunder and the gentleness of water together. Whoosh! Hua! Hua! At this moment, a strange scene occurred. The sword shadow in the air suddenly split into 2, then into 4, and then into 8. In the blink of an eye, a terrifying sword net was formed in the air. It rolled like a tide and enveloped Nie Tian. So powerful! The crowd could not help but exclaim when they saw this scene. However, Nie Tian shook his head and murmured, "Using such a clumsy sword technique against me, aren't you looking down on me?" Lu Yun's sword net seemed to be brilliant, but it was actually his biggest flaw. By doing so, he expanded the range of his attack, making it impossible for Nie Tian to dodge. However, by doing so, the power of each sword shadow was greatly weakened. It was more than powerful, but not as sharp. He seemed to think that Nie Tian would choose to avoid a frontal attack, which was why he used this sword technique to force Nie Tian to face it head-on. 8 Baron's sword. In the next moment Nie Tian reacted. With a low growl, he slashed out with his sword. The sword essence was like a raging wave as it clashed with Lu Yun. Rumble! 2 violent forces clashed against each other. Sword wills intertwined, causing the void to tremble. Lu Yun frowned and was shocked. He immediately retreated. On the other hand, Nie Tian's body swayed a little before he stood firmly. After a while, the violent force dissipated. The crowd looked at the 2 people in the sky with trembling eyes. They could not believe what they had just seen. Facing Lu Yun's sword, Nie Tian did not retreat. Instead, he forcefully clashed with it. The result of the clash was that Nie Tian had forced Lu Yun to retreat. Genius Lu, your strength is only SOSO. At this moment, Nie Tian smiled faintly and raised his eyebrows. The calm voice sounded like a clap of thunder in Lu Yun's ears, causing him to jump up in anger. He was ranked 9th on the Sky Sword leaderboard and he was being mocked by a swordsman with the legendary sword body. You're courting death. In the next moment, Lu Yun suddenly raised his head. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared at Nie Tian. With a roar, the sword essence from his body was released. It was extremely terrifying. Then, he took a step forward. The void trembled and his aura surged like the sea. Lu Yun is angry. The crowd's eyes trembled. It was obvious that they were looking forward to what would happen next. The attack just now was just the beginning. Next, Lu Yun and Nie Tian would have a battle of life and death. Stop! However, at this moment a low roar rang out. After that, a sharp figure appeared in the air, staring at Lu Yun with a solemn expression. Lord Sixth Hao Tian. The crowd's eyes trembled as they looked at the newcomer and cried out in alarm. They did not expect Sixth Sky to appear at this moment. Teacher! Lu Yun was stunned for a moment. Then, he quickly reacted and bowed to Sixth Sky respectfully. No matter how arrogant he was, He did not dare to disrespect Sixth Sky. Lu Yun, have you had enough? Sixth Sky looked at Lu Yun and said cold, Did you cultivate in the Valley of Swords for so long just to embarrass yourself? Teacher, Lu Yun's face stiffened. His body was drenched in cold sweat. I didn't use my full strength just now. Give me another chance. I will definitely defeat Nie Tian. You didn't use your full strength? Sixth Sky sneered and reprimanded. Then do you think Nie Tian used his full strength? If he had used his full strength just now, you would be a corpse by now. Lu Yun's eyes trembled. He was speechless. He did not understand why Sixth Sky would praise Nie Tian so much and belittle his own disciple. The crowd was stunned when they saw this. They could not believe their eyes. The Sixth Haotian had come to protect Nie Tian in every way he could. Between Nie Tian and Lu Yun, who was his disciple? Nie Tian's lips twitched, but he did not say a word. He did have the chance to kill Lu Yun in the previous attack, but there was no need for him to kill Lu Yun since there was no feud between them. Lu Yun, are you not convinced now? Sixth Sky looked at Lu Yun and asked in a deep voice. I'm not convinced. Lu Yun's face turned red. He could not help but look at Nie Tian and growled. Why don't you fight me? Sixth Sky's eyes darkened as an overbearing aura was unleashed. I wouldn't dare. Lu Yun was stunned. His face turned pale as he immediately knelt in front of Sixth Sky. Chapter 3350. Arrogance. You'd better not, Sixth Sky shouted as he glanced at Lu Yun coldly. Lu Yun didn't dare to say anything else, but he was depressed. He had wanted to avenge Sixth Sky, but he didn't understand why he had angered Sixth Sky. Could it be that Nie Tian was someone very important to the Sixth Haotian? Get up, Sixth Sky said cold. Then, he glanced at everyone and said loudly, Everyone, the appearance of the sword seal in the sky is a big event for swordplay in the sky. For the next 3 months, you don't have to mine sword essence anymore. Prepare for the upcoming competition in the sky. Great. We can finally rest. Everyone cheered excitedly when they heard Sixth Sky's words. Ever since they came to swordplay in the sky, they had to mine sword essence from the 10,000 sword mountains almost every day. Although their strength had been increasing, it was very boring. The upcoming competition in the sky would give them 3 months of rest. Of course, they were very excited. The sword seal in the sky has appeared. Everyone here will have a chance to enter it. At this time, Sixth Sky waved his hand and signaled for everyone to be quiet. He continued, but whether you can really enter it depends on your strength. Everyone was extremely excited. Someone couldn't help but ask loudly, Lord Sixth Sky, how can we enter the sword seal in the sky? Don't worry, Sixth Haotian said calmly. When the other sword mountain groups arrive, there will be people who will explain things to you. His lips curled into a strange smile. The entire swordplay in the sky was divided into 6 sword mountain groups, which were controlled by the Sixth Sky. Nie Tian was in the 6th sword mountain group, which was controlled by the Sixth Sky. The competition in the sky was not only a matter of the 6th sword mountain group. Swordsmen from the other 5 sword mountain groups would also participate. The total number of swordsmen in the 6 sword mountain groups was more than 500,000. There were so many swordsmen, and they were all geniuses of the way of the sword who had come from various realms. There were even some geniuses of the way of the sword who had come from the holy world. The battle between them would definitely be intense. Nie Tian looked into the void with an ugly expression. He was worried about Yang Sun. The 7 guardians hadn't appeared yet, but they should be appearing soon. Next, everyone waited outside the sword seal in the sky, taking the opportunity to sense and absorb the power of the sword intent in the sword seal in the sky. The sword intent in the sword seal in the sky was the innate sword intent nurtured by the heavens and earth. After being absorbed by a martial artist, it could be directly transformed into their own sword intent. Moments later, many swordsmen appeared in the void one after another. Half a day later, more than 500,000 swordsmen had all appeared. These were all the swordsmen of the Sky Sword Marshals. At this moment, they were gathered outside the sword mark in the sky, like a dense dark cloud. It turns out that there are so many famous swordsmen in the Sky Sword Marshals. Nye Tian looked at the crowd around him and could not help but smile bitterly. There were more than 500,000 swordsmen. How many sword crystals did the Sky Sword Marshals provide to the Holy World every year? Sure enough, the sword marshals in the Sky Sword Marshals were a huge sword crystal mine. More than 500,000 people gathered together. Even if no one spoke loudly, the scene was still chaotic, and it was so noisy that it hurt people's eardrums. Everyone, please be quiet. At this moment, a black-clothed figure stepped out of the void and spoke in a deep voice. His thunderous voice resounded in everyone's ears as if it was going to shatter their eardrums. Immediately, the crowd quieted down, and everyone looked at the black-clothed figure. It was a middle-aged man with strong facial features. His face was as sharp as a knife, and his eyes emitted a gloomy light. He was not angry, but he was dignified. Nye Tian looked at the middle-aged man and could not help but narrow his eyes. The aura of the sword intent around the man was even stronger than that of the sixth sky. Clearly, the man's strength in the way of the sword was above the sixth sky. This person is even stronger than the sixth sky. He must be a sky or even a protector, Nye Tian thought to himself as he looked at the middle-aged man with a gloomy gaze. He had guessed correctly. The middle-aged man was a sky, and he was the first sky. Everyone, the 7 protectors are currently in the sword seal in the sky, so I, the sky, will temporarily host the competition in the sky. The first sky glanced at everyone and said loudly with a dignified gaze. Everyone's expression changed slightly, and they immediately became even quieter, waiting for the first sky to continue. First of all, I, the sky, would like to tell everyone that the space in the sword seal in the sky is limited, so no more than 10,000 people can enter. The first sky chuckled and said, in other words, less than 1 in 10 people can enter the sword seal in the sky. Sigh. As soon as the first sky's voice fell, the whole audience sighed. Many people knew that they were not qualified to enter the sword seal in the sky. The sword seal in the sky opened once every 10,000 years, and it was filled with the purest sword will of heaven and earth. To be able to enter it was the dream of all swordsmen. However, the space in the sword seal in the sky was limited, so it was destined that most of the people present would not be able to enter. You ants should know your limits. The sword seal in the sky is not a place that just any trash can enter. At this time, an extremely discordant voice was heard. It was extremely insolent, and it directly humiliated everyone present. Everyone was stunned at first, and then they looked in the direction of the voice. They saw a man in blue standing there arrogantly. His eyes were squinting, and his eyelids were rolling up to the sky. It was this man who had just humiliated them. The crowd looked at the man in blue, and their expressions were very ugly. They could not help but whisper, "Who is this guy? Why is he so insolent? His sword will aura is very strong. He is definitely someone on the sword ranking in the sky. This person is indeed arrogant. However, he has the right to be arrogant. This is the benefit of being strong." The crowd discussed among themselves, and there was a hint of fear in their eyes as they looked at the man in blue. "You bunch of ants, listen up. This young master is Rin Kunyu from the Kunlun Sacred World. I am currently ranked 7th on the sword ranking in the sky. What I said earlier was for you ants. If there is anyone who is not convinced, then step forward and fight me." Rin Kunyu announced his name, and his arrogance became even more insolent. His eyes were filled with disdain, as if he wanted to look down on people with his nostrils. "So, he is from the sacred world," the crowd exclaimed, feeling very shocked. A swordsman from the sacred world, and an existence ranked 7th on the sword ranking in the sky. No wonder Rin Kunyu was so insolent. Idiot! Nie Tianling glanced at Rinkunyu and laughed coldly in his heart, but he did not say it out loud. He did not want to cause unnecessary trouble. Furthermore, Rinkunyu was an expert with a certain level of strength. It was just that he was a little too arrogant. Isn't he just ranked 7th on the sword ranking in the sky? What's so great about him? At this moment, someone could not help but say in a low voice. Chapter 33:51. Die for him. Boom. Rinkunyu's eyes were filled with killing intent as he locked onto that person. Killing intent surged from his body, and his aura was extremely violent. He was a swordsman from the Saint Realm. How could he allow an ant from a realm to interfere with him? I didn't say anything. Sensing Rinkunyu's killing intent, that person was so scared that his face turned pale. His lips were a little dry as he spoke in a trembling voice. He didn't say anything? However, Rinkunyu wasn't going to let him off. With a cold laugh, a terrifying sword intent gushed forth from his body, enveloping that person. It was like a raging tidal wave, crashing into the void, majestic and majestic. Boom! That person felt a suppressive force coming from above his head, as if his body was about to be torn apart. At this moment, he felt as if his entire body was about to be torn apart. Intense pain assaulted every inch of his flesh, making him wish he was dead. So strong. Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. Their eyes trembled and they couldn't help but exclaim. Although Rinkunyu was overly arrogant, his strength was definitely not for show. He was ranked 7th on the Sky Sword ranking, and his sword principle had reached the 4th heavenly layer of sword aura, making him even stronger than Lu Yun. Furthermore, his current methods were extremely cruel. He clearly possessed the strength to kill that man, yet he chose to torture him. Ants should have the awareness of ants. At this time, Rinkunyu sneered and swept his gaze across everyone. Today, this young master will teach you how to be an ant. Kneel. In the end, Rinkunyu roared fiercely and released an even more terrifying sword aura that pressed against that person. He didn't want to kill this person, but he wanted to torture and humiliate him. This. The faces of the crowd stiffened, and they gasped in astonishment. Not only was Rinkunyu arrogant, but his methods were also ruthless. Making a swordsman kneel in front of everyone was undoubtedly a blow to the swordsman's heart, making him unable to raise his head in the future. I won't kneel. That person was extremely unyielding. He roared out, his spine straight, proud and unyielding. Everyone's hearts trembled. Many people gnashed their teeth as they looked at Rinkunyu. They were on the verge of losing control. However, at this moment, the first sky and the other sky beasts were watching with cold eyes. They had no intention of stopping Rinkunyu at all. Rinkunyu was someone from the Kunlun Holy Realm. Behind him was a powerful clan. Furthermore, his eldest brother was one of the 7 guardians of the Sword Martial Sky. With such a status, even those in the sky would not dare to provoke him. Offending Rinkunyu for the sake of an ant was clearly not a wise move. Nie Tian frowned as he watched from the side. You're not going to kneel? At this time, Rinkunyu coldly smiled and said, This young master wants to see if your bones are harder or if this young master's sword intent is stronger. Boom. After he finished speaking, his body shook, and an even more violent sword chi surged out, roaring like a wild beast, pressing towards that person. Bang! Crack crack! The next moment, a dull sound came from the void. That person's body swayed, and then both his knees broke. Blood gushed out and dyed his legs red. However, he still did not kneel. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Rinkunyu. He actually laughed maniacally and growled, Rinkunyu, you want me to kneel? You'll have to kill me first. The crowd trembled and their expressions changed. Although this swordsman was not strong, he was unyielding and worthy of respect. However, respect was only respect. No one was willing to risk their lives to save someone. Ant, you've angered this young master. Rinkunyu's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he was completely enraged. He roared like a wild beast, and the killing intent in his eyes intensified. He said, "Since you want to die, this young master will fulfill your wish." Boom! Before he finished speaking, an even more violent sword chi was released from Rinkunyu's body. It rolled like thunder, sweeping everything and pressing towards that swordsman. This time, Rinkunyu was determined to kill. As long as the sword chi landed, that swordsman would definitely be suppressed to death on the spot. Swoosh! At the moment of life and death, a sword essence suddenly appeared, piercing through the air. It was sharp and cold, and it fell from the sky, blocking the impact of Rinkunyu's sword chi. Bang! Almost at the same time, that swordsman's body shook, and he broke through the pressure of the sword chi. His body suddenly swayed, and he took a few steps back. Just as he was about to fall, a hand reached out from behind to support him. Then, he felt a warm sword essence flowing through his body, and his flushed face instantly returned to normal. It's you." That person was shocked. He did not expect that someone would save him. After he turned around, he saw an unexpected face, and he spoke in a trembling voice. "Nyetion." The people from the 6th Sword Mountain looked at the person who saved him, and their eyes trembled violently as they shouted a name in unison. No one expected that the person who saved him was actually Nyetion. Nyetion. Lu Yun's eyes trembled when he saw that the person who saved him was Nyetion. Then, a cold glint appeared in his eyes, and he said in his heart, "Nyetion, how dare you interfere in Rinkunyu's matters? You're dead." As one of the top 10 powerhouses on the Sky Sword leaderboard, Lu Yun knew Rinkunyu better than the average person. Rinkunyu was arrogant, domineering, ruthless, and vengeful. Nyetion daring to make a move at this time was undoubtedly a slap to Rinkunyu's face. Given Rinkunyu's character, he would definitely not rest until he was dead. "You can leave." Nyetion ignored the others and only spoke to that person. Then, he took a step forward and stared at Rinkunyu. "Who are you?" Rinkunyu glared at Nyetion, his eyes filled with fury and killing intent, as if he couldn't wait to skin Nyetion alive. In the Sky Sword leaderboard, there was actually someone who dared to interfere in Rinkunyu's matters. He was simply tired of living. "This matter ends here." Nyetion did not answer Rinkunyu. Instead, he frowned and said faintly. He saved him because he felt that the person just now was very courageous and should not die in such a sullen manner. Rinkunyu was very arrogant and he looked down on him. However, Rinkunyu had no enmity with him, so he did not want to be enemies with him. "End here." Rinkunyu sneered, and the murderous intent in his eyes intensified. He roared, "Brat, who do you think you are? Since you dare to interfere in my matters, you should be prepared to die. Since you saved that ant, then you can die in his place. Kill." Rinkunyu roared like thunder, and the sword intent in his body moved crazily. He took a step forward, and the sword intent surged crazily, condensing into a ferocious wave that pressed towards Nyetion. He intended to crush Nyetion to death with his attacks. However, it was a pity that he had underestimated Nyetion. Bang! Nyetion frowned and also took a step forward. The sword intent in his body was released crazily, and the two terrifying sword auras collided with each other. There was a muffled sound in the void that was like a thunderclap. In the next moment, Nyetion and Rinkunyu retreated at the same time. The difference was that Nyetion retreated 3 steps, while Rinkunyu retreated dozens of meters. The strange scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble. After they sucked in a breath of cold air, their expressions froze. Chapter 33:52. Overbearing. Hundreds of thousands of eyes stared at Nyetion and Rinkunyu in the air. They were all stunned. Nyetion did not lose out at all in a head-on clash with Rinkunyu. He even managed to force Rinkunyu back several dozen meters. Everyone's eyes widened when they saw this. It was like a dream. They wondered if what they were seeing was an illusion. How is this possible? About a dozen seconds later, Rinkunyu's thunderous roar broke the silence. His face was pale, and his eyes were trembling violently. He looked at Nye Tian with disbelief, shock, and a hint of apprehension in his eyes. Rinkunyu had actually lost in the clash of swords. He was a swordsman from the saint's world. He was ranked 7th on the sword ranking of the sky. He was a monstrous genius of the way of the sword, an unparalleled prodigy. But now, he had actually lost to an 8th-order pseudo-saint who only had the transcendent sword body. He was unable to accept this. He refused to accept it. He could not accept it. Gasp. At this moment, everyone reacted to Rinkunyu's roar and gasped. They looked at Nye Tian in surprise and fear. The shock they felt was indescribable. In the sky, the first sky and the others nearby all looked at Nye Tian with mixed emotions. Their eyes shone brightly, and they were extremely shocked. Originally, they thought that Nye Tian would be killed by Rinkunyu directly. They never thought that Nye Tian would face Rinkunyu head-on and not lose out at all. He even gained an absolute advantage. These people in the sky were all oracle swordsmen. Although it was only for a moment, they could all see how powerful Nye Tian was. If Nye Tian had been a little more ruthless and attacked with his sword with all his might, he would have definitely killed Rinkunyu on the spot. Clearly, Rinkunyu had been too careless when he faced Nye Tian with the transcendent sword body. He did not take Nye Tian seriously at all, so he did not even draw his sword. It was exactly because of his arrogance that he lost so miserably. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. At this moment, Rinkunyu's eyes trembled. He roared as if he had gone mad. He pointed at Nye Tian and said, "You ant, how can you be so strong? I, Rinkunyu, am a genius ranked 7th on the sky sword ranking. How could I be defeated by you?" As he spoke, his aura grew stronger and stronger. He was a genius, so how could he lose to an ant? "I'm an ant." Nye Tianling let out a laugh. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he said, "What right do you have to mock me with your meager strength? You keep saying that others are ants, but when you were defeated by me, didn't you look just as ugly?" Rinkunyu's eyes trembled. He was just about to say something when he felt a tightness in his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. He came from the saint's world. No one had ever dared to mock him like this among the swordsmen of the sky. At this moment, he was so angry that he vomited blood. Nye Tian is really arrogant. The crowd watched the scene in front of them with trembling eyes. Their hearts were in turmoil. In particular, those who were familiar with Rinkunyu sneered while they were shocked. Given Rinkunyu's status and strength, the two of them had become sworn enemies after Nye Tian had humiliated him in front of everyone. If Rinkunyu did not kill Nye Tian, he would definitely not be able to take it lying down. Nye Tian, you're dead meat. Lu Yun looked at Nye Tian with a gloomy expression. He was very pleased with himself. This was because he had developed a deep hatred for Nye Tian when the 6th sky had lost his temper. However, he knew that it would not be easy to kill Nye Tian. Now that Nye Tian had offended Rinkunyu, the latter would not let it go so easily. "You can't take a few words from me?" Nye Tian smiled coldly when he saw Rinkunyu vomiting blood. "You should think about it. What kind of expression would you have if I forced you to kneel now?" Nye Tian had only said a few words of truth, and Rinkunyu had already vomited blood. However, Rinkunyu had humiliated everyone present and even forced them to kneel. How despicable was his method! "You ant! I'll kill you!" At this time, Rinkunyu finally exploded. With a loud roar, the sword aura around his body was like a raging wave. A green longsword appeared in his hand. It was incomparably sharp and cold. Swoosh! In the next moment, Rinkunyu stabbed out with his sword. A green sword radiance fell from the sky like a waterfall of flowing light. It carried extreme killing intent and attacked Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He unsheathed the starry heavenly slash, and the sound of the sword resonated through the sky. The void trembled and a sword shadow appeared. The sword radiance instantly bloomed and filled the space within tens of thousands of meters. Boom! The two sword shadows met in the void. After the collision, they shattered at the same time and turned into surging sword waves that dissipated in the air. Nye Tian retreated slightly. His face was so gloomy that it looked like blood would drip from it. He had tolerated Rinkunyu many times, but the latter was overbearing and wanted to kill him. He could not tolerate it any longer. Die, ant! At that moment, Rinkunyu let out another furious roar and slashed down with his primal spirit sword, the Seven Starry Skies sword. A streak of sword light slashed through the air, leaving a cyan trail in the air as it swept towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian slashed out and blocked the sword shadow. Then, Rinkunyu attacked several times, but Nye Tian easily neutralized them. Damn it! Rinkunyu was even more furious that he could not kill Nye Tian. He roared like a wild beast and his eyes were red. His killing intent was even more intense. He had to kill Nye Tian today. Rinkunyu, don't be so aggressive! Nye Tian shouted as he looked up at first Haotian and the others, who were floating high up in the sky. He had sensed that the sword intent of First Sky and the others were pulsing. Clearly, they were ready to fight. Since Rinkunyu came from the saint's world, it meant that his identity was extraordinary. If Nye Tian dared to kill Rinkunyu, First Sky would definitely take action. They allowed Rinkunyu to kill others, but they definitely would not allow others to kill Rinkunyu. I'm going to kill you! Rinkunyu's fury soared to the heavens. How could he possibly give up? With a thunderous roar, he slashed out with the 7 slaughter heavenly domains. 7 sword projections appeared in the void at the same time. Like 7 azure dragons, they carried incomparably powerful auras as they slashed towards Nye Tian. Rinkunyu was completely enraged. He directly used his strongest move, 7 Absolutes Sky Slaughter. Boom! In an instant, Nye Tian felt a terrifying force fall. Under the pressure of this force, the space around him became tense as if it was going to be torn apart in the next moment. Has Rinkunyu lost his mind? The crowd could feel the waves of sword will in the air. Their eyes trembled violently and they were extremely shocked. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Nye Tian frowned slightly. The corner of his mouth twitched and his eyes were filled with coldness. He had been tolerating Rinkunyu, but now that Rinkunyu was going all out to kill him, he could not bear it anymore. Boom! In the next moment, Nye Tian's face darkened. Terrifying sword intent surged out of his body, and a terrifying sword intent soared into the sky, causing the void to tremble. Chapter 33:53. Boom! In the void, Nye Tian's sword momentum soared into the sky. His aura became more and more intense and powerful, causing the void around him to tremble. The First Sky was stunned by this scene. His eyes trembled and his calm face revealed a look of shock. He couldn't believe his eyes. In the blink of an eye, Nye Tian's sword Dao had advanced from the divine sword body stage to the divine transcendence stage. Even though he had seen countless battles between swordsmen, he had never seen such a scene. How could a swordsman forcibly increase his sword principal realm? Moreover, at this moment, there was no bloody aura around Nye Tian. Obviously, he had not ignited his blood chi. The moment Nye Tian's sword will increased, the First Sky sensed a terrifying power surging in Nye Tian's body, which made him feel a trace of fear. Not only the First Sky, but the other Sky experts were also stunned and shocked when they saw Nye Tian's berserk state. Everyone could also feel the surge of Nye Tian's aura. They were shocked and panicked, and they could not help but shout, "What's going on?" If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed it. What method did Nye Tian use to increase his sword principal realm? 9 limits of the starry sky, sun annihilation. At this moment, the corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched coldly. He opened his mouth and the starry heavenly slash swept across the sky. A murderous aura bloomed and instantly enveloped the entire void. Renkunyu suddenly felt a terrifying aura coming towards him. His eyes trembled and the sword will in his body froze for a moment. The next moment, he felt an incomparably real aura of death. Boom! At this moment, a terrifying sword shadow appeared in the void. Like a raging dragon, it charged into the void and caused the space to tremble. A dazzling sword radiance bloomed, illuminating the entire sky and pressing down on the 7 sword shadows. The eyes of the crowd were burning with excitement. They trembled and looked forward to the most terrifying collision in the next moment. Whoosh! However, right at this moment, a profound sword insight appeared high up in the sky, and it crashed down. That sword intent didn't seem eye-catching, but its aura was like a boundless river that flowed endlessly. Boom! In the next instant, the mysterious sword intent actually erupted with a monstrous momentum and formed a sword intent vortex in the air, forcibly absorbing the attacks of Nye Tian and Renkunyu. Everyone was stunned by the scene before them. Their expressions trembled, and they were unable to describe the shock in their hearts. To be able to devour the 2 terrifying attacks so easily, what kind of heaven-defying technique was that? After that, the sword vortex vanished, and the space returned to its previous calm. It was clear as if nothing had happened. Nye Tian steadied himself and raised his head to look at a figure high up in the sky. The person who intervened at the critical moment was the first sky. Renkunyu was sweating profusely as he looked at the first sky, his eyes trembling. Luckily, the first sky intervened in time. If the collision had happened, he would have been the one injured. The power that Nye Tian erupted in an instant was too terrifying, and Renkunyu was unable to resist it. How can this guy be so strong? At this moment, the person who was the most shocked was Lu Yun. The way he looked at Nye Tian was filled with indescribable shock and fear. He was arrogant, but he knew his limits. Even Renkunyu, who was ranked 7th on the sword leaderboard in the sky, was no match for Nye Tian. How could he possibly be a match for Nye Tian? At this moment, he finally understood how powerful Nye Tian was. Previously, the 6th sky had stopped him and even reprimanded him. It was a wise decision. Nye Tian looked ordinary on the surface, but his true strength was extremely terrifying. When he unleashed it in an instant, it made people shudder. Just like Renkunyu, he was shocked by the power that Nye Tian had released in an instant. At this moment, the first sky looked at Nye Tian with a pair of majestic eyes. His face was gloomy, and he seemed to be thinking about something. He did not expect Nye Tian to be so powerful. Nye Tian was also very confused at this moment. He was already prepared for the worst. He knew that the first sky would definitely intervene, but he did not expect that the latter would not kill him, but instead stop him from fighting Renkunyu. "Kid, you are Nye Tian?" At this moment, the first sky's lips twitched, revealing a stiff smile. He said in a low voice as he glanced at the 6th sky at the same time. He had heard about Nye Tian a long time ago, but he did not believe it. He did not believe that a godly state swordsman could fight to a draw with the 6th sky. However, after seeing Nye Tian, he finally believed it. Nye Tian was indeed a genius in swordsmanship. He was able to defy the heavens with the godly sword body. Such a person not only amazed people, but also made people feel that he was dangerous. Originally, with the first sky's murderous nature, he wanted to kill Nye Tian directly. However, it was now the time for the competition in the sky, and the sword seal in the sky needed a genius like Nye Tian. Just now, when the first sky made a move, he felt the aura of the 6th sky move, as if he was going to make a move as well. What surprised him even more was that the 6th sky actually locked its aura on him. This undoubtedly meant that the 6th sky wanted to attack him just now. What was the 6th sky trying to do by attacking him? However, when the first sky made a move, the 6th sky restrained its aura. The corner of First Haotian's mouth twitched as he thought to himself, Sixth Hautian, you seem to have a special relationship with this kid. He concluded that the sixth sky made a move to protect Nyetian. He was very curious about the relationship between the sixth sky and Nyetian. He did not believe that the sixth sky wanted to attack just because of Nyetian's talent. Do you know me, Lord Hautian? Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the first Hautian and smiled. He sensed a flash of murderous intent in the first sky's eyes. QL 11-inch. As soon as you came to the sky, you killed Yang Sun and tied with the sixth sky. These things have long been spread in the sky. Even if I don't want to know your name, I can't, the first sky said with a cold smile. Are you complimenting me, Lord Sky? Nyetian was equally calm. Sort of, the first sky twitched his lips and said, let's call it a day between you and Rinkunyu. It's just a small misunderstanding. Don't take it to heart. Since Lord Sky has spoken, I will naturally obey. Nyetian bowed slightly and withdrew his sword aura. Then, he glanced at Rinkunyu with undisguised disdain in his eyes. Rinkunyu's expression turned ugly. He was furious, but he could only nod. He knew that he was no match for Nyetian. If they continued to fight, he would be the one to suffer. The small disturbance ended just like that. However, everyone knew that the enmity between Nyetian and Rinkunyu had been established, and it would not end just like that. Chapter 33-54. Killing intent everywhere. When Nyetian saw the face of the young man in blue, he frowned and his heart sank. It was an unfamiliar face, but Nyetian felt that it was very familiar. It was clearly similar to Yang Sun's. However, the face of the young man in blue was more exquisite and beautiful. His eyes were extremely demonic, emitting an icy blue glow that sent chills down one's spine. The blue-robed young man stared at Nyetian, and killing intent flashed in his eyes. It was so sharp that it seemed as if the space around him had been frozen. What a cold aura! Nyetian's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed in surprise. Although the young man in blue did not speak, the murderous intent in his eyes was obvious. Nyetian guessed that this person must be related to Yang Sun. Nyetian, he's Yang Sun's son, Yang Bingxian. You've killed Yang Sun, he won't let you off. At this moment, a deep voice sounded beside Nyetian, filled with killing intent. Nyetian's eyes narrowed as he looked at Lu Yun. It was the latter who had spoken. Are you reminding me? The corners of Nyetian's lips curled up as he smiled. He did not expect Lu Yun to speak to him at this moment. Humph. Lu Yun smiled coldly and said, I might as well give you another reminder. Yang Bingxian is ranked 3rd on the Sky Sword list. His strength is far beyond mine and Rinkunyu's. Furthermore, he is good at assassination, so you have to be careful. Oh, is that so? Nyetian smiled again and said, if that's the case, I'll have to thank you for your reminder. It won't be too late to thank me if you can survive Yang Bingxuan's attack. Lu Yun smiled as his eyes darkened. His words to Nyetian were more of a threat than a reminder. His strength was not enough to kill Nyetian, but seeing Nyetian die in Yang Bingxuan's hands made him very happy. Don't worry, I will definitely survive. Nyetian smiled faintly and ignored Lu Yun. Before the martial arts competition in the sky had even begun, he had already offended 3 of the top 10 on the Sky Sword list. It seemed like the road ahead of him was not going to be so easy. Everyone, your divine souls will soon enter an illusion. Your martial cultivation base will be suppressed to the peak paramount god level, and your Tao of the Sword will be suppressed to the transcendent God's Word soul level. At this moment, the first sky glanced at the crowd and said, in the illusion, you can attack as you wish. Those who are killed in the illusion will not die, but their souls will return to their bodies. However, once he comes out of the illusion, it means that this person will be deprived of the right to enter the Sky Sword seal. So that's how the exalted first sky is going to eliminate people. Unsightly expressions could be seen on the faces of the crowd. entering an illusion where everyone's cultivation base would be suppressed to the peak paramount God level and the transcendent God's word soul level was a very dangerous thing to do. In this way, it was equivalent to testing the swordsman's talent and not his strength. After all, the more talented a person was, the more power they would be able to unleash within the same cultivation level. Listen up, ladies and gentlemen, the first Sky Sword Seal said. The Sky Sword Seal can only hold 10,000 people. In other words, most of the sword cultivators present will not be able to enter the Sky Sword Seal. The first Clear Sky continued to speak in a loud voice. If you want to enter the Sword Seal, then show me your strength. Everyone's eyes trembled even more. First Haotian's words were clearly encouraging the swordsmen present to kill each other. Some of the more talented ones were smiling coldly, and their eyes glittered with coldness as they stared at the weaklings in their eyes. The following illusionary realm was destined to be a great wave washing away the sand, eliminating the martial artists with weak talent and letting the people with stronger talent obtain the qualifications to enter the Clear Sky Sword Seal. Those with weaker talent were no different from ants, and should have been eliminated in the first place. Alright, let's enter the illusion. At that moment, the first Haotian laughed heartily. A light shadow mirror appeared in his hand, and he spun it in his hand. Suddenly, a dazzling light appeared and turned into countless beams of light that enveloped every swordsman present. Everyone felt their souls tremble, and in the next moment, they entered an unfamiliar environment. It was a world of swords, filled with intense sword will. Up above, countless illusory swords could be seen hovering over everyone's heads, as if they might fall at any moment. What is this place? How could there be such intense sword will? It's so magical. Everyone looked at the space around them, and their eyes couldn't help but tremble. They felt a sense of novelty and shock. This is an illusion in the Sky Sword Seal, said a powerful voice from First Sky. All of you will be suppressed by the warding spells, and your cultivation bases will be suppressed to the same level. Is that true? The crowd's expressions changed, after which they sensed their own bodies, and their expressions changed. First Sky was right. They were all suppressed to the peak paramount God level, and their Tao of the Sword had been suppressed to the transcendent God Sword Soul level. Now it's time for you to do whatever you want. Once you eliminate less than 10,000 people, the illusion in the Sky Sword Seal will be lifted. Then, the first Clear Sky's voice rang out again. But remember, the restrictions in the Clear Sky illusion will become stronger. In 10 days, the warding spells will be so strong that you won't be able to handle them. Therefore, you have 10 days to eliminate less than 10,000 people. The powerful and cold voice resounded in everyone's hearts, causing everyone to feel a great impact. Within 10 days, the more than 500,000 people present would be eliminated until less than 10,000 remained. Such a high rate of elimination was simply too cruel. Lu Yun hovered in midair, looking at Nye Tian from a distance, his voice cold and sinister. Nye Tian, he said, this illusion has saved your life. He had been planning to join forces with Ren Kunyu and Yang Bingxian to kill Nye Tian in the first round of the test. How could he ever have guessed that killing Nye Tian would be of no use? It would only allow his soul to return to his true body. Nye Tian's eyebrows furrowed slightly as he was deeply shocked. The mirror of light and shadow that First Sky Sword Seal had just taken out was simply too terrifying. In the blink of an eye, it had taken the souls of hundreds of thousands of cultivators and forced them into an illusion. Humph! A moment later, Nye Tian became cold, and when he sensed the change in the atmosphere, he chuckled coldly and murmured, I just got here, and I'm already surrounded by killing intent. He could sense several auras closing in on him, and it was obvious that they didn't have good intentions. Emo Qianjun, who was standing next to Nye Tian, smiled bitterly and said, Brother Nye, it seems a lot of people are interested in you. Chapter 33:55. A Killing Spree. Nye Tian's mouth twisted into a strange smile, and his eyes flickered with coldness. Considering how strong his sword intent was, and how well he controlled it, no one in the same cultivation level as him could possibly be a match for him. Unless it was someone like Six Sky, who had a far superior understanding of sword intent, there was no one who could possibly stand up to him. But the sword cultivators in the illusion were all young, and none of them had the same level of understanding of sword intent as Six Sky. Emo Qianjun could sense the confidence in Nie Tian's eyes. "Brother Nie, let's fight side by side," he said with a cool smile. In the clear heaven illusion, everyone was suppressed to the peak paramount god level, so Emo Qianjuan's cultivation base was no longer a weakness. Therefore, he was much more confident than before. The truth was that Emo Qianjun was extremely talented in the Tao of the sword. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been on the same level as Nie Tian in the past. Furthermore, his performance in the Sky Sword martialism showed that he was no weaker than anyone else. He hadn't been in the Sky Sword martialism for very long, and the fact that he had reached the transcendent level of profundity went to show how talented he was. Unfortunately, his cultivation base was only in the 5th step, which severely limited his sword intent. But now that everyone was on the same level as him, Emo Qianjun wasn't afraid of anyone else. He was curious to see if his Tao of the sword would be able to suppress anyone in the same cultivation level. "All right," Nie Tian said, laughing heartily, his eyes glittering with arrogance and passion. After all these years, he was very excited to be able to fight side by side with 9th Heaven Sword martialism. Unfortunately, Jiu Qianxing didn't have a god soul, so he couldn't even enter the illusion in the Sky Sword martialism. Otherwise, the three of them would be able to fight side by side. There was one other thing that Nie Tian found strange. Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue hadn't shown up yet. The sword seal in the Sky Sword martialism had opened, but Nie Fenghua hadn't shown up. That made Nie Tian a bit worried. Although Bailey Xingxue hadn't been in the Sky Sword martialism, the Sky Sword martialism should have been back. Nie Tian was worried, but he couldn't care too much about it now. He could only focus on what was in front of him. At this time, more than a dozen figures appeared, surrounding Nie Tian and Emo Qianjun. "Brother Emo, it seems like someone has been eyeing me for a long time." Nie Tian's eyes swept across the tens of swordsmen in front of him. His lips twitched as he said with a bitter smile. He hadn't been in the Sky Sword martial school for long, but the things he had done were earth-shattering. He had killed 100 swords, killed 1,000 swords, destroyed Wan Jian, and even fought to a draw in the Sky Sword martial school. No matter which swordsman it was, they would need to spend countless years to achieve this. However, Nie Tian did it in an extremely short period of time, making him unparalleled in the limelight. It was normal for him to be targeted. In particular, he had killed Yang Sun. The latter had been operating in the Sky Sword Club for many years. His power was deeply rooted, and he had the support of a big shot. Many people wanted to take Nie Tian's head and claim credit from the big shot behind Yang Sun. I have tolerated these people for a long time. Today I can finally kill them all. Emo Qianjun laughed loudly and said, "They see me as an ant. I want to see how strong they are when we are in the same realm." Emo Qianjun was a steady person, but he had been discriminated against too much in the Sky Sword martial school. He finally had the chance to vent his pent-up frustrations. Of course, he wanted to fight to his heart's content. Kill him and avenge Lord Yang Sun. At this time, a swordsman roared. His figure moved in an instant. His figure was agile like a demon. With a thrust of his sword, a sharp sword intent attacked Nie Tian. "Your speed is not bad, but your momentum is too weak." Nie Tian laughed coldly. He didn't even draw his sword. Instead, sword intent surged out of his palm, and he thrust it out. Instantly, the void trembled, and a wave of sword intent surged out, sweeping everything in its path. Bang! The swordsman did not even have the chance to let out a final scream. His figure trembled and turned into a ray of light. He was killed by Nye Tian and became the first person to be expelled from the illusion in the sky. This guy is so strong. The surrounding people could not help but exclaim. At the same realm, Nye Tian did not draw his sword. He only used his momentum to kill his opponent. One could imagine how strong he was. In the distance, a pair of cold eyes locked on Nye Tian. It was Yang Sun's son, Yang Bingxian. Nye Tian, you really did not let me down. Yang Bingxian stared at Nye Tian and said in his heart, but now it is just the beginning. Your road to the sky martial arts competition is destined to end in this illusion. Although he could not kill Nye Tian by expelling him from the illusion, he could deprive him of the right to enter the sword seal in the sky. If Nye Tian could not even enter the sword seal in the sky, he would be no different from a waste. At that time, Yang Bingxian would personally kill Nye Tian. No one would dare to object. Who would protect a waste who could not even enter the sword seal in the sky? Kill! The first person to attack was killed by Nye Tian, but the others did not retreat. Instead, they roared in unison and moved at the same time. Swoosh! Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, numerous sword shadows whizzed through the air towards Nye Tian and Emo Qianjun. The two felt the space around them tighten. Their eyes narrowed at the same time and they immediately attacked. 1. Emo Qianjun attacked with the infinite sky. There was an intense sword cry in the void. At the same time, the great sky sword seal in his body was activated. In an instant, a powerful force burst out, causing the space to tremble. Boom! In the next moment, a sword shadow whizzed out and pressed towards several swordsmen, drowning them directly. The crowd was shocked. They did not expect Emo Qianjun, who usually did not have a presence, to be so terrifying. Boom! 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 On the other side, Nye Tian killed with his sword. Several sword shadows appeared and each sword shadow killed one person. Nye Tian's sword intent could fight people 2 realms above him. Under the same cultivation realm, these people were like chickens and dogs in front of him. But at this time, more people surrounded them. Pairs of eyes stared at Nye Tian and Emo Qianjun as if they wanted to eat them up. Kill! Nye Tian's eyes swept across and he roared. The starry sky streaked across the void. Wherever the sword shadow passed, heaven and earth trembled and the gods and ghosts wailed. His sword intent seemed to have the power to destroy everything. Wherever the sword pointed, it was invincible. Emo Qianjun was like a fish in water, killing everything in his way. These people, who were usually high and mighty, were actually so vulnerable at this moment. Those 2 guys are so scary. The crowd stared at Nye Tian and Emo Qianjun with wide eyes. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. In just a blink of an eye, Nye Tian and Emo Qianjun eliminated hundreds of people. This was simply abnormal. Yang Bingxian, are you still not going to attack? Nye Tianling stood in the air. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at the empty space coldly. There was nothing in that space, but Nye Tian knew that Yang Bingxian was hiding there. Lu Yun said that Yang Bingxian was ranked 3rd on the Sky Sword ranking. Not only was he strong, but he was also good at assassination. Chapter 33:56. Qian Sun Cold Air. Those who were good at assassinations had very strong concealment abilities. They were like ferocious tigers lying in the bushes, waiting to give their prey a fatal blow. At this moment, Yang Bingxian regarded himself as a tiger and Nye Tian as his prey. Unfortunately, Nye Tian was no ordinary prey. He had already seen the ferocious tiger's every move clearly. Yang Bingxuan's concealment method was brilliant. With Nye Tian's spiritual force, he shouldn't have been able to discover him. However, Nye Tian had a freakish existence by his side, the Evernight Demon Fox. Everything that the Evernight Demon Fox sensed was reflected in Nye Tian's mind. Therefore, all of Yang Bingxuan's actions were under Nye Tian's control. Bang! At this moment, the space trembled. After that, a sharp blade appeared, emitting an extremely cold aura. Everywhere it passed by, the sword intent in the air was actually frozen. In an instant, everyone felt a piercingly cold air appear and spread out in the void, almost freezing the entire illusory realm. Crack, crack, crack. The void trembled and an extremely cold aura filled the void. Frost and snow actually floated in the air. Everyone's eyes trembled violently as they felt the chill in the air intensify. At this moment, the corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. You finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Yang Bingxian couldn't help it and directly attacked him. In the next moment, Nye Tian reacted. His figure was like a ghost as he sidestepped dozens of meters to the side, perfectly avoiding the blade of cold air. However, he was still affected by the residual power of the cold blade. A wave of cold air enveloped him and instantly entered his body. Nye Tian's silhouette paused in the air and a strange scene occurred. His entire body was actually covered in a layer of ice crystals, and he was completely frozen. Nye Tian. This shocking scene caused Emo Qianjuan's eyes to tremble. He let out a cry of surprise and flew toward Nye Tian. In the void, a silhouette appeared. It was Yang Bingxian. When he saw Nye Tian, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He had never imagined that Nye Tian could actually dodge his killing blow. To him, this was simply impossible. In that instant, the speed of the blade of cold chi had reached its peak. It was impossible for Nye Tian to avoid it, unless he had already sensed it. Yang Bingxian was very confident in his identity. Even the Oracle swordsman might not be able to detect him. Moreover, he had purposely suppressed his aura just now, not even the slightest fluctuation. How did Nye Tian find him? In the next moment, the corner of Yang Bingxuan's mouth twitched into a sneer as he murmured, "It doesn't matter anymore. Even if you can dodge the cold blade's frontal attack, you can't stop the cold energy from entering your body. Right now, you're just a target. How long more can you survive? Kill him." After saying that, Yang Bingxian growled and gave the order to the martial artists below. He had never underestimated Nye Tian, so he arranged so many people to kill Nye Tian. He wanted to make Nye Tian slack so that he could burst out with a fatal blow and kill Nye Tian. However, Nye Tian's strength still exceeded his expectations. Even so, Yang Bingxian felt that there was no hindrance. Nye Tian was still going to be killed. Kill! In the next moment, dozens of swordsmen roared at the same time. Their auras were like rainbows as they instantly attacked. Sword intent attacks tore through the air, aiming to kill Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes trembled slightly as the dragon vein in his body circulated crazily. He had expected Yang Bingxian to attack, but he didn't expect the latter's cold energy to be so terrifying and domineering. The moment the cold energy entered his body, it directly froze all the meridians in his body. It was extremely terrifying. If it weren't for his strong martial body, the cold energy would have instantly frozen him into ice. "All of you, get out of my way!" Emo Qianjun roared and activated the Juntian sword seal to the extreme. His whole body released a powerful sword intent that enveloped Nye Tian and formed a sword intent shield around him. Bang, bang, bang! Then, the violent attacks landed on the sword shield and exploded with a dull sound. The sword shield formed by the Juntian sword seal helped Nye Tian block all the attacks, but there were countless cracks on the sword shield, and it was on the verge of collapse. Kill! Die! At that moment, two deep, murderous voices echoed out at the same time as two figures dashed through the air, brandishing their swords in an attempt to kill Nye Tian. Emo Qianjun looked at the two people and could not help but be stunned for a moment. The two people who attacked were Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun. These two people were ranked in the top 10 of the Sky Sword ranking. They actually chose to attack at this time. How despicable! Although Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun's strength was suppressed, they were monstrous sword arts geniuses after all. Under the same level of strength, they could easily crush ordinary geniuses. Emo Qianjun could only block one person with all his strength. It was impossible for him to save Nie Tian. Fight. At this critical moment, Mo Qianjuan's eyes darkened. Then, he moved and formed a sword-soul doppelganger. Boom. Boom. The two doppelgangers attacked Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun at the same time. Boom. Boom. In the next moment, the two sides collided at the same time, causing the void to tremble. The crowd was shocked. Mo Qianjun formed a doppelganger in an instant to fight against Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun at the same time. It was too strong. Yang Bingxian, who was high up in the sky, trembled and his killing intent became heavy. He did not expect that a rank 5 pseudo-sacred swordsman beside Nie Tian would be so difficult to deal with. It seemed that he would have to kill one more person after getting out of the illusion in the sky. Bang! Bang! At this moment, two muffled sounds could be heard. Mo Qianjuan's two doppelgangers shattered at the same time and turned into rays of light. He had been blasted out of the illusion in the sky. However, he had blocked the fatal attacks from Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun for Nie Tian. Mo Qianjun. What he saw caused Nie Tian's eyes to tremble, and he roared like a wild beast. Immediately, the blood in his body flowed in reverse, and waves of dragon aura were released, forcing out the cold aura in his body. Bang! The ice crystal outside his body instantly shattered, and a towering sword will burst out. Damn it! Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun growled when they saw this. Their figures froze and they retreated at the same time. However, Nie Tian's eyes were fixed on them like the eyes of a ferocious wolf. Since the two of them had blasted Mo Qianjun out of the illusion, they would not be able to stay here. Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun stood still and felt Nie Tian's violent killing intent. Their hearts trembled and their faces were filled with unconcealable fear. They knew that Nie Tian was furious. How is this possible? In the sky, Yang Bingxian stared at Nie Tian with his mouth twitching and his eyes filled with shock. Nie Tian had actually forced out his 1,000 Sun cold qi. This was something that he had never dreamed of. The 1,000 Sun cold qi was the power of his bloodline. It was extremely cold, and could turn snow into a blade. He had used this power to kill opponents who were much stronger than him. However, his 1,000 Sun cold qi was forced out against Nie Tian, who was at the same realm as him. Could it be that his bloodline power is stronger than mine? Yang Bingxuan's eyes widened in shock. To be able to force out the 1,000 Sun cold qi meant that Nie Tian had a stronger bloodline power. All of you, attack together. At this moment, Nie Tian's gaze swept across Yang Bingxian and the rest. He said coldly, to avoid trouble. Chapter 33:57. In the sky illusion, Nie Tianling stood in the air. His eyes were filled with coldness like a vicious wolf. The aura around him was terrifying. The sharp sword intent was like a sharp blade, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Yang Bingxuan's eyes turned cold. He took a step forward and the coldness around him intensified. Frost and snow floated in the air within 10,000 meters. It's so cold. The coldness entered their bodies. Everyone couldn't help but shiver as they looked at Yang Bingxian in fear. Nie Tian, you're able to force out Qian Sun's cold qi. This is beyond my expectations. Yang Bingxuan's eyes flickered with, but it doesn't matter. It won't change anything. It will only make your death more unsightly. His cold voice fell, and every word was filled with cold, killing intent. Is that so? Nie Tianling laughed. The corner of his mouth raised into a contemptuous arc. He was not afraid of anyone in the same realm. Even if Yang Bingxian was ranked 3rd on the Sky Sword ranking, he was not afraid. Arrogant. Yang Bingxuan's eyes were cold. A sword made of ice appeared in his hand. It was his Yuan Ling sword, Shuang Yu Qian Sun. Swoosh. In the next moment, Yang Bingxuan's figure moved. The Shuang Yu Qian Sun swept across the sky. Suddenly, a sharp blade appeared, causing the surrounding space to tremble. With extreme speed, the blade flew towards Nie Tian. Yang Bingxuan's body contained a powerful bloodline, Qian Sun's cold qi. When he was young, he used a secret technique to sacrifice his Yuan Ling sword to cultivate the sword intent of Qian Sun. The sword of Qian Sun was incomparably powerful. Coupled with the terrifying cold qi, a single slash was enough to freeze an entire mountain. Qian Sun's cold qi? Nie Tian smiled coldly. The corner of his mouth twitched as he swung the sword in his hand. A strand of sword intent shot out from the tip of the sword and condensed into a huge dragon in the air, roaring as it charged forward. Rumble! The giant dragon soared into the sky and attacked fiercely, shattering the cold blade in the sky. At this moment, Yang Bingxian furrowed his brows as he felt a pressure bearing down on him. His expression changed as he retreated in a frenzy. QL11 he steadied himself, his forehead dripping with cold sweat. His eyes trembled as he looked at Nie Tian. The strength of Nie Tian's sword intent had exceeded his expectations. It was simply unbelievable. Yang Bingxian, if this is your strength, then it's too disappointing. Nie Tianling smiled coldly and was extremely arrogant. Sword intent and dragon qi swirled around his body like burning flames. Even though Qian Sun's frost qi was frightening, he had fused his sword will with his dragon qi, causing the power of the frost qi to be greatly weakened. You're courting death. Being mocked, Yang Bingxian was enraged. He roared and took a step forward. An ice tentacle appeared under his feet. It was like a ghost claw that extended through the void. Boom boom boom! At the same time, the snowflakes floating around Yang Bingxian's body instantly became violent, whistling in the air like a sleeping beast. The next moment it would erupt with a murderous power. Yang Bingxian is angry. The crowd's eyes trembled as they started to retreat. They could see that Yang Bingxian was being suppressed by Nie Tian. If it was under normal circumstances, they would think that Nie Tian was not Yang Bingxian's opponent. After all, the difference between their realms was too great. But in the sky illusion, Nie Tian and Yang Bingxian, who were at the same realm, seemed to be stronger than Nie Tian. This undoubtedly meant that at least in terms of sword Dao, Nie Tian was stronger than Yang Bingxian. Nie Tian, go to hell! At this time, Yang Bingxian roared, and then his figure moved. The ice tentacles under his feet spread out in an instant. It was as if thousands of demons were dancing wildly, filled with a terrible chill. Like a storm, it pressed towards Nie Tian. At the same time, the frost around Yang Bingxian's body instantly became sharp, like a beast baring its claws. The fierce aura and killing intent were strong. Feeling the cold aura rushing towards him, Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed and his face changed. And at the next moment, an even more terrifying scene happened. Ka ka ka. The frost in the void actually bloomed and turned into ice blades in the air. Condensed snow into ice blades. Nie Tian's heart trembled and his face changed. Yang Bingxian's strength had exceeded his expectations. His control over the sword intent had reached such a superb level. Using the sword intent to condense frost and snow, and using frost and snow to condense ice blades, it was brilliant and full of killing intent. What is he trying to do? The onlookers suddenly noticed something, and their faces changed as they exclaimed. Yang Bingxian was obviously going to erupt with his true strength, and his strength was far beyond everyone's expectations. Perhaps in the next moment, many people would be caught in the crossfire. Kill! At this moment, Yang Bingxian roared hoarsely, and his face was ferocious, like a wild beast. Swish, swish, swish. Suddenly, the thousands of ice blades in the void moved in an instant, like a rain of arrows, covering the sky and earth, bombarding Nie Tian. But the range of the ice blades was too large, and Nie Tian was not the only one who had to bear the attack. Come! Nie Tianling stood in the air. His eyes flashed with a cold light. With a low roar, the sword intent in his body surged endlessly, and then the power of demons and gods surged out, surging violently, bringing with it a terrible dark aura, making people feel a strong sense of destruction. 9 limits of starry sky, sun annihilation. In the next moment, Nye Tian roared, and the starry sky slash was unleashed. Sword shadows whistled out, and the power of demons and gods bloomed in the void, as if darkness had descended, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Rumble! Swish, swish, swish. Then, the sword shadows fell, attacking the thousands of ice tentacles and the endless ice blade storm, causing the void to tremble. An ear-piercing sound rang out, causing people to feel that the heavens and earth were shaking, as if the world was about to collapse. Almost there. At the same time, ice blades and ice tentacles fell from the sky, landing on the crowd, and wails of ghosts and howls of wolves could be heard. Yang Bingxian released the congealing snow blade technique, intending to kill Nye Tian, but he didn't care about the others. Of course, he wouldn't care about this. In his eyes, these ants shouldn't be here, and they didn't have the qualifications to step into the sword seal in the sky. Kill! At this moment, Nye Tian roared, and his silhouette didn't stop, using the sword shadows in front of him as a shield, wanting to forcefully break through the ice blade storm. Courting death! Yang Bingxian roared in a low voice, killing intent flashing in his eyes. The Qianshuan frost qi within his body surged forth, causing the ice blade storm and ice tentacles to become even more violent. Especially those ice tentacles, which continued to extend in the air, enveloping Nye Tian. Waves of cold qi were like maggots, crazily seeping into Nye Tian's body, wanting to freeze his meridians. Nye Tian activated the astral soul shield, but it could only block the ice tentacles. It was unable to block the cold qi from entering his body. Chapter 33:58. Truly ferocious. That kid was killed by Yang Bingxian. The crowd retreated in a frenzy. Many of them couldn't see Nye Tian's figure and couldn't help but exclaim. Nye Tian clearly had the absolute advantage just now, but in the blink of an eye, he was submerged by the ice tentacles. Wasn't he dead for sure? Just now, countless ice blades fell, killing thousands of people on the spot. Nye Tian was surrounded by even more terrifying ice tentacles. How could he have a chance to survive? Although that guy is monstrous, he still couldn't defeat Yang Bingxian. Everyone's eyes trembled as they looked at Yang Bingxian in horror. At this moment, they were certain that Nye Tian had been frozen into pieces by the ice tentacles. Humph! Yang Bingxian sneered and shouted, Nye Tian, Yang Bingxian, have said it before. You can't change the result. Useless struggle will only make his death more unsightly. Is that so? However, right when he finished speaking, a low voice resounded, and it actually came from within the boundless ice tentacles. It was precisely Nye Tian. Yang Bingxian was stunned for a moment. His face became as ugly as it could be. Nye Tian's words were like a slap to his face, mercilessly slapping him. That guy isn't dead, everyone exclaimed. They didn't expect Nye Tian to still be alive. Under the ice tentacles, how could Nye Tian survive? Bang! In the midst of everyone's bewilderment, a muffled explosion suddenly rang out. A terrifying force broke through the encirclement of the ice tentacles and extended into the void. What is that? Everyone's eyes trembled. They saw a thing that looked like an iron chain dancing wildly in the air, emitting a mysterious aura that caused their hearts to tremble. This mysterious aura was the power of the heavenly Tao. That iron chain was the heavenly Tao's shackles. Bang! 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 Following that, more chains broke through the ice. Suddenly, the void was filled with a strong aura of the heavenly Tao. The ice in the space was actually slowly melting. A total of 9 shackles of the heavenly Tao were broken. Like a 9-headed serpent, it danced wildly in the air, exuding an imposing aura. How is this possible? Yang Bingxian was shocked by the scene in front of him. His eyes were trembling in disbelief. Nye Tian was actually able to break out of the ice after being submerged by the ice tentacles. This was simply unbelievable. Just what kind of power was in Nie Tian's body to be able to break through the ice tentacles? Bang! However, at that instant the 9 shackles of the heavenly Tao began to vibrate violently. The rift began to tremble as countless icy tentacles shattered into pieces. Yang Bingshuan's eyes trembled violently and his expression became sluggish. Yang Bingxian, you're dead. At this moment, Nie Tian's figure appeared. 9 heavenly Tao shackles surged around his body, and he exuded a powerful and imposing aura. At the same time, his entire person looked extremely strange. Boom! As soon as his voice fell, the 9 heavenly Tao shackles moved at the same time. They gathered together like a giant dragon and attacked the ice blade storm. Rumble! Crack, crack, crack! The power of the heavenly Tao shackles erupted in an instant and actually tore the ice blade storm apart. Yang Bingshuan's eyes trembled. He instantly reacted and retreated frantically. Die! However, at this moment, an ice-cold voice rang out from Nie Tian's throat. Immediately after, he slashed out with his sword. The instant the sword's shadow rushed out, a terrifying power blossomed, as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Yang Bingxian felt a terrifying strangling force appearing, causing his expression to change as he screamed in horror. Bang! However, it was already too late. A muffled sound came from the void. Yang Bingshuan's figure was sent flying, turning into a ray of light and disappeared. Yang Bingxian was killed. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. Their faces instantly stiffened and they were speechless for a long time. Nie Tian was too terrifying. He actually blasted the 3rd-ranked swordsman on the sky sword ranking out of the illusion. This also meant that Yang Bingxian had lost the qualification to enter the sword seal in the sky. It sounded a bit ridiculous that the 3rd-rank swordsman couldn't enter the sword seal in the sky. But it was true. Nie Tian deprived Yang Bingxian of the opportunity to enter the sword seal in the sky. Nie Tian, how dare you drive Yang Bingxian out of the illusion? At this moment, Lu Yun finally reacted and said with trembling eyes. Not only will I expel Yang Bingxian, but I'll expel you as well. Nie Tian spun around and fixed Lu Yun with a pair of cold, murderous eyes. It was because of Lu Yun and Ren Kunyu that Mo Qianjun was blasted out of the illusion. Since Mo Qianjun couldn't enter the sword seal in the sky, Nie Tian wanted Lu Yun, Ren Kunyu, and the others to also not be able to enter the sword seal. You! Lu Yun's eyes trembled. He was extremely shocked and his words became somewhat incoherent. He said, I am a disciple of the 6th sky. You can't kill me? I can't? Nie Tian sneered and took a step forward. His entire body surged with a violent and boundless aura, and without the slightest hesitation, he slashed out with his sword. Where the sword shadow landed, Lu Yun didn't even have time to let out a final scream before he was directly killed. This guy. The crowd's faces stiffened and the corners of their mouths could not help but twitch. Nie Tian actually blasted Lu Yun out of the illusion. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian killed 2 swordsmen from the top 10 swordsmen on the sky sword ranking. How could they not be shocked? Nie Tian, you! Ren Kunyu screamed at the side. He was so scared that his face turned pale and he couldn't even speak. Under normal circumstances, he wasn't a match for Nie Tian. In the illusion in the sky, it was even more impossible for him to be a match for Nie Tian. Get out of here too! Nie Tian roared and directly slashed with his sword. Ren Kunyu didn't even have time to react and was directly blasted out. This guy is really fierce. The crowd looked at Nie Tian with unconcealable shock and fear on their faces. Nie Tian was too terrifying. He killed 3 swordsmen in the top 10 of the sword ranking in a row. Yang Bingxian, Ren Kunyu, and Lu Yun, as the top 10 swordsmen on the sword ranking, were actually unable to enter the sword seal in the sky. This was enough to make them a joke. Who else wants to kill me? Come at me together. At this time, Nie Tian's gaze swept across everyone. His eyes were like a hawk's and a wolf's, flickering coldly. He released a fierce and domineering aura that made people shudder. The crowd's eyes trembled, and many people were so scared that cold sweat broke out on their faces. Nie Tian's sword intent and his control over it were far superior to anyone else's. If he went on a killing spree, it was estimated that none of these hundreds of thousands of people could stop him. In fact, in the Sky Sword ranking, there were existences stronger than Yang Bingxian. However, they didn't want to make a move against Nie Tian at this time. Their strength was stronger than Nie Tian's, but under the same realm, they were somewhat afraid of Nie Tian. Entering the Sky Sword seal was a big deal. It wasn't worth the risk on Nie Tian. Many people present wanted to kill Nie Tian, but they understood that in this illusion, they couldn't be a match for Nie Tian. Chapter 33:59. Twin stars of ice and fire. As soon as Nie Tian's voice rang out, everyone was so shocked that no one responded. Since no one wants to speak, then step back. Nie Tian's eyes were evil. He said in a cold tone, "I don't want anyone to be within a 10,000-meter radius of us." A 10,000-meter radius? The crowd was shocked. They all stepped back and stayed far away from Nie Tian. At this moment, Nie Tian was like a monster. It was better to stay as far away from him as possible. Nie Tian had an absolute advantage in the illusion in the sky, but he chose not to attack. This was kind to the others. If he attacked with all his strength, even the first and second-ranked swordsmen on the Sky Sword ranking would not be able to stop him. Then, under the watchful eyes of countless people, Nie Tian sat down with his legs crossed and entered into a state of cultivation. Haotian illusory realm was not an ordinary environment, but it was transformed by pure sword essence. It was filled with the aura of sword essence. Cultivating here was a kind of enjoyment for a swordsman. This guy is cultivating here? The crowd looked at Nie Tian and their eyes were shaking. They were speechless. Haotian illusory realm was the cruelest elimination for all swordsmen. In the end, only 10,000 people could survive in the illusory realm. The elimination rate was so high that it was very cruel. However, under such circumstances, Nie Tian actually started cultivating, which made everyone's jaws drop. Nie Tian had his own plan. The first sky said that the sword pressure in the illusion would become stronger and stronger. After 10 days, it would be too strong for everyone to bear. Therefore, he didn't need to waste his time to eliminate others. He just needed to let the illusion eliminate itself. This was a fair way. If they couldn't even bear the sword pressure in the illusion, they would only be able to make up the numbers by entering the sword seal in the sky. In the distance, a red-haired young man looked at Nie Tian. The corners of his mouth twitched as he muttered to himself, "This guy is quite smart." The red-haired young man was tall and sturdy, with handsome features. His eyebrows were like swords, and his eyes were like stars. He looked extremely sharp, especially his fiery red hair, which was extremely violent. From afar it looked like burning flames. The sword intent on his body converged, but the inadvertently surging fire sword intent showed his strength. His aura was even more terrifying than Yang Bingxian. His name was Li Jin, and he was ranked second on the Sky Sword list. Together with Yang Bingxian, they were known as the Ice and Fire Twin Stars. However, he had never gotten along with Yang Bingxian. The two of them were like ice and fire. Raging Flame had seen the entire process of Nie Tian killing Yang Bingxian and the others. He was shocked that Nie Tian's control over sword will was so terrifying. He was somewhat fearful of Nie Tian and didn't dare to take the risk. Otherwise, he would really want to fight Nie Tian. This kid called Nie Tian, his talent in the way of the sword is so strong, I'm afraid he's comparable to that guy. Li Jin looked at Nie Tian, the corner of his mouth twitched, and said in his heart, "It seems that after arriving at the Sky Sword seal, I have to pay attention to him." Immediately after, Li Jin also sat cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. He didn't want to make a move. He chose the same method as Nie Tian, and let the illusion itself eliminate the others. Following that, everyone looked at each other. It was actually very calm. Many people couldn't help but sit down and enter a state of cultivation. They already understood what Nye Tian meant, so they adopted the same method as Nye Tian and let the illusion itself eliminate the participants. 3 days later, as the sword pressure grew stronger, half of the people were eliminated. 5 days later, there were still 100,000 people left in the illusion. 7 days later, there were less than 30,000 people left. And on the 8th day, there were only a little more than 10,000 people left in the entire illusion. These people could be said to be geniuses among geniuses. Each of them could be called a monstrous swordsman. Everyone was bitterly holding on, because they knew that as long as they held on for a little longer, they would be qualified to enter the Sky Sword Seal. After half a day, finally, a group of people couldn't bear it anymore and were killed by the terrifying sword pressure and left the illusion in the Sky Sword Seal. At this moment, the entire void shook and the world changed. The illusion disappeared, and everyone's divine soul returned to their bodies. Brother Nye. Seeing that Nye Tian had woken up, Mo Qianjun shouted excitedly. The rock that was hanging in his heart was finally lifted. After he was blasted out of the illusion by Lu Yun and Ren Kunyu, he had been guarding beside Nye Tian. After that, Yang Bingxian, Lu Yun, and Ren Kunyu were blasted out of the illusion one after another. All of them were in a sorry state, and they looked at Nye Tian with murderous eyes, as if they wanted to eat him up. Mo Qianjun was really worried that they would directly attack Nye Tian, so he had been guarding Nye Tian. Fortunately, the 6 great skies were watching everything from high up in the sky, so Yang Bingxian and the others did not dare to make a move. At this moment, when Nye Tian left the illusion, the faces of Yang Bingxian and the others suddenly became ugly, and their eyes were surging with blazing anger. Nye Tian blasted them out of the illusion and deprived them of the qualification to enter the sword seal in the sky. How could they not be angry? But even if they were angry, they would not dare to make a move at this time. They had long been afraid of Nye Tian. At this time, those who had just come out of the illusion looked at the first sky in the void with a smile on their faces. After coming out of the illusion, they would enter the mysterious sword seal in the sky next. Everyone, congratulations on passing the test of the illusion in the sky. Next, you can enter the sword seal in the sky. The first sky said loudly, and his majestic voice made people's hearts surge. However, those who were eliminated had ugly expressions on their faces, and could only look at them anxiously. Yang Bingxian, Ren Kunyu, Lu Yun. At this time, the first sky spoke again, looked at Yang Bingxian and the others, and said, "The 3 of you can also enter the sword seal in the sky." When the crowd heard the voice of the first sky, they could not help but tremble, and their faces became even uglier. They were also eliminated, but why could Yang Bingxian and the others enter the sword seal in the sky? Everyone was unwilling, but no one dared to stand up and question. The first sky has absolute power, and it can let anyone enter the sword seal in the sky. What's more, the strength of Yang Bingxian and the others is indeed very strong, and they are all in the top 10 of the sword list in the sky. Brother Nye. Nye Tian frowned and took a step forward. Just as he was about to say something, he was stopped by Mo Qianjun. The latter shook his head and smiled bitterly. "I know my strength. Even if I enter the sword seal in the sky, I will only be cannon fodder. It is better to stay here and take care of Brother Jiu." Nye Tian's eyes sank, and after thinking for a moment, he finally nodded. He wanted to fight for the qualification to enter the sword seal in the sky for Mo Qianjun, but since the latter said so, he did not insist. In fact, he knew that Mo Qianjun wanted to enter the sword seal in the sky, but he did not want to be a burden to Nye Tian, so he gave up. Chapter 3360. Chapter 355. Chapter 355 Guardian in the sky above the sky, the sword seal hung between heaven and earth like a giant. A terrifying aura permeated between heaven and earth, forming a sword-will barrier in the space. The first sky and the other skies brought the people who passed the test to the sword seal in the sky. What a powerful sword-will aura! Everyone was only tens of thousands of meters away from the sword seal in the sky. They were shocked to feel the sword-will aura released by the sword seal. Everyone present was a swordsman, so they were very sensitive to sword-will. The aura of the sword seal in the sky was vast and endless. Everyone stood outside the sword seal and looked up, as if they were looking at a towering mountain. The sword seal in the sky is indeed mysterious. The sword-will contains the great Tao of heaven and earth. If I can comprehend it, it will be of great help to improve my swordsmanship. Nie Tian frowned and thought to himself. He had never seen anything that could release such a terrifying sword-will. The endless aura seemed to be able to cover heaven and earth, causing the void to tremble and heaven and earth to bow down. Everyone, I will open the sword seal in the sky now. Get ready to enter. At this moment, the sword-will of the first sky skyrocketed and a terrifying sword momentum was released. It was violent and sharp, as if it was going to tear heaven and earth apart. As expected of Lord Sky. Such a sword momentum is really terrifying. Everyone's eyes trembled and they looked shocked. The moment the sword-will of the first sky bloomed, everyone felt a terrifying pressure and the void trembled slightly. The sword-will of the first sky should be stronger than that of the sixth sky. Nie Tian felt the sword-will aura of the first sky and his expression changed slightly as he thought to himself. Boom! At this moment the first sky made a move. The sword-will in his hand condensed into a sword and he slashed out. The sword shadow roared like a wild beast, oppressing the void and attacking the sword shadow in the sky. Boom! The sword shadow fell and landed on the sword-will barrier outside the sword mark in the sky. After a muffled sound, the sword shadow collapsed and a gap of 100 meters appeared on the sword-will barrier. So strong! Nie Tian's eyes trembled and he was shocked. First, breaking through the sword-will barrier in the sky with a single strike. Such a method could be said to be terrifying. In the sky sword martial art, everyone's martial Tao strength would be suppressed to the peak of pseudo-saint. Therefore, the first sky broke the barrier of the sword seal in the sky with his sword Tao strength. Everyone, let's go in, said the first sky in a low voice. His figure flickered, and everyone entered the sword seal. Everyone's eyes were burning with passion. After that, their silhouettes moved, each displaying their own innate techniques, exploding forth with their fastest speed, madly rushing towards the gap in the barrier. Nie Tian was not in a hurry and watched quietly from the side. The sword-will barrier had a strong regenerative ability. At this moment it was already slowly closing up. However, the speed was very slow, and it was enough for everyone to enter. However, at this moment something unexpected happened. A figure came to the edge of the gap, and unexpectedly stopped moving. He was extremely domineering, not letting anyone near the gap. Nie Tian frowned and saw that the domineering person was none other than Yang Bingxian. Yang Bingxian, what are you doing? Seeing this scene, the first sky's face darkened and he roared angrily. Lord First Sky, many of these people are like ants. They are not qualified to enter the sword seal in the sky. Why don't I increase the difficulty of entering the sword seal and see if these ants can still enter? Yang Bingxian sneered, and then released a cold aura from his body, sealing the gap. Then, his figure moved, and his evil eyes swept across Nie Tian. After a cold smile, he entered the sword seal. Asshole! First Sky roared, and his face became extremely ugly. The cold aura that Yang Bingxian left behind sealed the entrance of the sword seal, causing everyone's speed to instantly slow down. But at this time, First Sky could not make another move, because he no longer had the ability to open up another gap. The sword-will barrier formed by the sword seal in the sky was very terrifying and difficult to break. Just now, First Sky had integrated a mysterious power into the sword, and only then could he barely break the barrier. However, that mysterious power was left behind by the Guardian of the Sky, and it could only be used once. And now, Yang Bingxian had sealed the entrance. According to the current speed of entering, at least half of the people would not be able to enter the sword seal in the sky. What was more troublesome was that the cold aura that Yang Bingxian released contained a bloodline seal, which was very difficult to break. Unless someone's bloodline power was more terrifying than Yang Bingxian's, and they could use their bloodline seal to break it. And Yang Bingxian was a warrior from the Holy World. His father was Yang Sun, and his grandfather was Yang Gengri. His bloodline power was very strong. Even First Sky and the others might not be able to break the bloodline seal. First Sky's face turned very ugly at this moment. If only 5,000 people entered the sword seal in the sky, it would be a major dereliction of duty. The Guardian of the Sky would not blame Yang Bingxian, but only him, the First Sky. "Let me do it." At this moment, a voice was heard, and then a figure flew out at an extremely fast speed. The person was still in midair, and he directly attacked. Boom! Boom! The sword's shadow was like a dragon, bombarding Qian Sun's cold aura. After a muffled sound, the cold aura directly collapsed. First Sky's eyes trembled when he saw the situation, and he was shocked. Nietian. In the next moment, he saw the figure clearly and shouted out the name. At this moment, Nietian's figure had directly entered the sword seal. The others were stunned for a few seconds before they reacted and entered the sword seal one after another. This person's bloodline power is even stronger than Yang Bingxian's. First Sky's face trembled as he understood, and his heart was filled with shock. A domain martial artist's bloodline was actually stronger than a martial artist from the Holy World. It was simply unbelievable. However, Nietian blasted away the cold aura, which made First Sky very happy, and his tensed face relaxed. After a while, everyone entered the sword seal in the sky, and the sixth sky were the last to enter. In the sword seal in the sky, the sword will float in the void, and the floating sword shadows seem to have a life of their own, flowing in the air like fish in the water. Everyone looked at this mysterious and magical world in front of them, and their eyes trembled, and their expressions became infatuated. The inner world of the sword seal in the sky was a world completely formed by the sword will, and it was extremely mysterious. The sword will in the space made everyone feel comfortable and happy, as if they had integrated with the world. Boom! At this moment, the void suddenly shook, and then 3 figures descended from the void. At this moment, the sword will in the space suddenly became much more active, and the momentum of the world changed, collapsing towards the 3 figures. The aura of the 3 figures was very powerful, and each of them had the strength to reverse the momentum of the world. Looking at the 3 figures, Nietian's eyes couldn't help but tremble. He was very familiar with one of the faces. It was Eternally Merciless. The 2 people standing next to Eternally Merciless had auras that were not weaker than his, and were even stronger. Without a doubt, the 3 people in front of him were all guardians of the sky. First Sky's Huaweidong respectfully welcomes the 3 guardians. At this moment, First Sky bowed deeply, and spoke respectfully to the 3 guardians of the sky. Grandfather. Almost at the same time, Yang Bingxian let out a strange cry, and suddenly pointed at Nietian and shouted, "The person who killed father is him." Nietian. In the sky, a grey-robed old man opened his mouth coldly, and his eyes were fixed on Nietian. He called out the latter's name word by word, and each word was filled with killing intent. Chapter 3361. Swords Drawn. Nietian. Boom! When the grey-robed old man shouted this name, his rage erupted like a volcano, causing the space around him to tremble and rumble. It was as if the space was about to be torn apart under the pressure of a huge force. Whoosh! At that moment, a powerful aura exploded in the air like a raging wave, causing everyone to back away from the impact. The eyes of the old man in gray were like sharp blades, glinting with a poisonous intent as he locked his gaze onto Nyetian, as if he wanted to tear him into pieces and feast on his bones and drink his blood. Nyetian didn't dodge. Instead, he stared straight at the gray-robed old man with a calm expression on his face. Although the old man in gray looked slightly aged, his hair was like steel needles, giving him a violent aura, like a ferocious lion or a ferocious tiger. His appearance was similar to Yang Xian and Yang Bingshuan's, which clearly indicated his identity. Yang Xian's father, Yang Bingshuan's grandfather, the second-ranked existence among the 7 guardians of the sky, Yang Gengri. Nyetian had guessed Yang Gengri's identity, but his gaze remained unwavering, showing no sign of fear. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and they could not help but lower their heads, not daring to look at Yang Gengri's murderous eyes. This guy is terrifying, he's not even afraid of the guardians of the sky. They murmured to themselves as they looked at Nyetian. In the next moment, a violent scene took place. Die! Yang Gengri's eyes flickered coldly as he let out a roar and slammed his palm down, causing a tremendous force in the air to suppress Nyetian. Bang! In the blink of an eye, Nyetian felt a terrifying pressure bearing down on him from all directions. It was as if a giant invisible hand was pressing down on him, making him feel powerless to resist. Yang Gengri was the guardian of the sky, with immeasurable strength. How could Nyetian have the strength to resist when he attacked him directly? If this palm were to land, Nyetian would definitely die without a corpse left. Swoosh! Right at the instant of life and death, a swift and fierce sword insight tore through the sky, and it actually pierced through the palm image in the sky. Nyetian's eyes flickered, and he immediately felt much more relaxed. His figure flashed, and he retreated several thousand meters, ingeniously avoiding the frontal attack. He made use of the gap created by the sword intent to save his life. But even so, his expression was still ugly, and a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. The power of the Sky Guardian was unimaginable to the current Nyetian. The crowd's faces froze, and they sucked in a breath of cold air as they looked at Yang Gengri in shock. Who would have thought that someone of Yang Gengri's status would actually directly attack Nyetian? It was truly a bit overbearing. What was even more unexpected was that the other Sky Guardian had also made a move. In the void, Nyetian steadied himself and bowed slightly to Eternally Merciless, expressing his thanks. Thank you, Senior Merciless. The person who had just saved him was none other than Eternally Merciless. Eternally Merciless, what is the meaning of this? Yang Gengri suddenly turned around, and his eyes were spewing flames of rage. He looked Eternally Merciless coldly and roared like a wild beast. He had not expected that Eternally Merciless would actually save Nyetian. Brother Yang, with your status and strength, it doesn't seem appropriate to attack a martial artist with the transcendent sword physique, Eternally Merciless said with a cold expression. He killed my son, so I killed him to pay for my son's life. What's wrong with that? Yang Gengri roared, and his anger was like thunder. Yang Sun's death had spread throughout the Sky Sword Martial. Although the 7 Sky Guardians were in the Sword Seal in the sky, they had heard about Yang Sun from some people who had entered the Sword Seal in the sky in advance. Yang Gengri knew that Yang Sun was dead, and in his rage, he wanted to rush out of the Sky Sword Seal to kill him, but he was stopped by the other Guardians. At this time, Nyetian had come to the Sky Sword Seal. How could he let the enemy who had killed his son live under his nose? Today, Yang Gengri must kill Nyetian and avenge his son. Yang Gengri, I heard that Yang Sun's death was a normal challenge. He died in the hands of Nyetian, and it was because he was not strong enough. Who can he blame? Eternally Merciless responded coldly, and there was no fluctuation in his eyes. He said, a challenge between swordsmen is fair. This is the rule of the Sky Sword Martial. Yang Gengri, as a guardian of the sky, are you going to take the lead in breaking the rules? T rules. Yang Gungri's face was gloomy and he roared. He stared at Nye Tian and shouted, "I will kill this kid today. Let me see who dares to stop me." Eternally merciless words sounded reasonable, but to Yang Gungri, it was clearly sophistry. As a guardian of the sky, they were well aware that they were people who were outside the rules, and could completely ignore the rules. Eternally merciless words were clearly to protect Nye Tian. However, Yang Gungri was determined to kill, and no one could stop him. If he, as a guardian of the sky, had to watch the enemy who had killed his son jump around in front of him in the sky sword martial, then this guardian of the sky would be too aggrieved. "Yang Gungri, with me here, you won't be able to kill Nye Tian today." Eternally merciless eyes darkened, and he responded in a similarly determined voice. The atmosphere was tense in an instant, and the two guardians of the sky were at daggers drawn. The crowd was dumbfounded by the scene in front of them. The two guardians were actually going to start a war for Nye Tian. This was too inconceivable. At this moment, everyone was sure of one fact. Nye Tian was a person with a powerful background, and eternally merciless was behind him. No wonder Nye Tian dared to be so arrogant after entering the sky sword martial, and even dared to kill Yang Sun. "Eternally merciless, you want to stop me?" Yang Gungri's face darkened, and his eyes were filled with coldness. He looked at Eternally Merciless and said word by word. Looking at his posture, he was really going to fight Eternally Merciless. "So what if I stop you?" Eternally Merciless replied coldly, and his words were as sharp as a sword. "If you stop me, I'll kill you too." Yang Gungri roared, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. He released his sword momentum, and the void trembled as if it was about to collapse. How terrifying! The crowd's eyes trembled, and their faces were filled with shock. An expert like Yang Gungri was too terrifying. "Can you kill me?" Eternally Merciless was not afraid at all, and he responded coldly. He also released his sword momentum, and an earth-shattering power was released in an instant. Bang! The next moment, the two sword momentum collided, and the void shook violently. The momentum of heaven and earth suddenly changed, as if the world was about to collapse. The crowd retreated, and their expressions became even more horrified. The battle between the two guardians of the sky was going to be interesting. Chapter 3362. Chapter 3357. The First Guardian. What a terrifying force! The sudden turn of events caused everyone's eyes to shudder. They could not help but exclaim as they glanced at the person who made the move. It was a white-robed swordsman who stood there like a sharp sword. He had come with Yang Gungri and Eternally Merciless. His identity was obvious. He was also a guardian of the sky. However, he looked very young. Judging from his appearance, he should be below 50,000 years old, or even younger. His temperament was elegant. As his white robe fluttered in the wind, he gave off the aura of a scholar and the pride of a swordsman. Most shocking of all was the strength of this white-robed swordsman. He was able to nullify the attacks from Yang Gungri and Eternally Merciless, as if he was stronger than the latter two. Initially, everyone thought that the white-robed swordsman would be the weakest among the three. Who would have thought that he would be the strongest? The First Guardian. Yang Gungri and Eternal Emotionless sword attacks were neutralized, and both of them were stunned for a moment. They then looked at the white-robed swordsman and did not show any anger. Instead, they were extremely respectful. The First Guardian? The eyes of the crowd flickered. Some of them could not help but exclaim. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. The white-robed swordsman was the First Guardian. The First Guardian was none other than the First Guardian of the 7 Guardians of the Sky. Since he was the First Guardian, his strength was without a doubt the strongest. However, the shocking thing was that the First Guardian was so young. Many of the crowd had spent a long time in the Sky Sword Samurai, but it was their first time seeing the First Guardian in person. Most of the matters in the Sky Sword Samurai were managed by the 6 sword slaves in the sky. Only a few important matters would attract the attention of the first guardian. As for the first guardian, not many people had seen him before. Even when the sword seal in the sky was activated, the first guardian did not show up. This time, the first guardian showed up in person, which surprised everyone. "What are you two doing?" The first guardian, Zhong Mingyu, glanced at Yang Gungri and Eternally Merciless and said coldly, "Don't tell me you want to kill each other in front of me?" Yang Gungri and Eternally Merciless narrowed their eyes, revealing fear as they lowered their heads and replied, "This subordinate dares not." It was obvious that they were very wary of Zhong Mingyu. "You better not dare." Coldly, Zhong Mingyu spoke, his tone filled with a sharp pressure. Looking at Yang Gungri, he asked, "Yang Gungri, are you sure you want to kill this swordsman named Nie Tian?" And Yang Gungri nodded heavily and said, "My son died at his hands. If I don't kill him, the resentment in my heart will never be resolved." After saying that, Yang Gungri turned around and looked at Nie Tian with a pair of cold eyes. He must kill Nie Tian. Otherwise, he would feel like there was a thorn in his back and a fishbone stuck in his throat. He would never feel at ease. "Eternally Merciless, are you sure you want to save Nie Tian?" Zhong Mingyu's eyes focused on Eternally Merciless and asked. "First Guardian, I've mentioned Nie Tian to you before. His talent in swordsmanship is extremely strong. He is the most terrifying swordsman I've ever seen in my life." Eternally Merciless lifted her head slightly and said, "He was able to kill Wan Jian's Yang Sun with only the ultimate sword body. This is enough to prove how powerful he is. The seal of the sky has already been activated. It would be such a pity to kill such a talented swordsman at this time." Eternally Merciless' eyes flickered as she paused for a few seconds before she continued, "I believe that Nie Tian could become, I got it." Before Eternally Merciless could finish, Zhong Mingyu suddenly waved his hand and interrupted Eternally Merciless. He knew what Eternally Merciless wanted to say, but he could not let Eternally Merciless say it now. The crowd looked at Eternally Merciless in confusion. They did not know what Nie Tian was going to say. What could he become? At this moment, Yang Gungri let out a cold laugh. Looking at Nie Tian with a disdainful expression, he said, "You think a piece of trash from a domain can do that? How ridiculous!" Yang Gungri naturally knew what Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless were talking about. "Is it funny?" Eternally Merciless laughed and said, "I think that Wan Jian dying in the hands of a swordfish who has just entered the Sky Sword Marshal is the real joke." "Eternally Merciless, you're so presumptuous." Yang Gungri's scar was torn open and he was enraged. He roared and looked at Eternal Emotionless with a cold, killing intent. "Do you still want to fight? I, Eternally Merciless, will accompany you to the end." Eternally Merciless responded cold, and did not give in at all. "You're going too far." Yang Gungri roared like thunder, and the sword intent in his body surged again. "Enough." However, at this time, Zhong Mingyu's voice sounded again. His roar reverberated in the air and shook the eardrums of everyone present. Yang Gungri's eyes trembled violently. The sword intent in his body instantly converged, and he looked at Zhong Mingyu with some confusion. He did not understand why Zhong Mingyu wanted to intervene in this matter. Was it just to stop him from fighting with Eternally Merciless? Yang Gungri felt that this was not the case. He faintly felt that Zhong Mingyu seemed to be protecting Nie Tian. But what was the relationship between Zhong Mingyu and Nie Tian? "Yang Gungri, I can understand that you want to avenge your son. But with your identity, do you think it's appropriate to attack Nie Tian?" Zhong Mingyu said in a deep voice, his eyes revealing a sense of oppression. As expected, Yang Gungri's eyes narrowed and his heart sank. Zhong Mingyu was really protecting Nie Tian. "However, I allow you to avenge your son in other ways." At this time, the corner of Zhong Mingyu's mouth twitched. His gaze swept across the crowd and he said, "Let the young people solve their own problems. Out of all the swordsmen here, you can pick any one of them. Let him fight with Nye Tian. If he can kill Nye Tian, then you will have avenged him. If not, then the matter with Yang Sun will end here. First Protector, are you serious? Yang Gungri looked at the First Protector, his eyes flashing like a sharp blade, as he asked excitedly. I, the First Protector, keep my word, Zhong Mingyu said softly, his expression extremely firm. All right. Yang Gungri laughed out loud. Then, he turned to Nye Tian and said, Brat, I'd like to see what you've got. Just now, he had attacked Nye Tian. Although he was stopped by Eternally Merciless, he also realized that Nye Tian's strength far exceeded that of other swordsmen of the same level. Moreover, Nye Tian had killed Yang Sun, which was enough to prove his strength. But among the swordsmen present, many were from the Sword Star. They were prodigies trained by the sword marshals in the sky. Many of them were even more terrifying than Wan Jian. Chapter 3363. Who dares to battle? The crowd's eyes trembled violently and their eyes could not help but flicker. Zhong Mingyu's words shocked everyone. Yang Gungri randomly picked someone from all the swordsmen present to fight with Nye Tian. This was tantamount to letting Nye Tian challenge all the swordsmen present with his own strength. Nye Tian had just entered the sky sword martial art not long ago, and many of the people present were swordsmen who had been cultivating in the sky sword martial art for a long time. Next, would Nye Tian be able to pass the challenge? Eternally Merciless' expression at this moment was also somewhat doubtful. His gaze swept across Nye Tian with some uncertainty. If they were in the same realm, he believed that with the strength of the swordsmen present, no one could beat Nye Tian. However, there were many people whose realms were far higher than Nye Tian's, and there were even many swordsmen with sword charm. Would Nye Tian be a match for them? Grandfather, let me kill this brat to avenge my father. At this moment, Yang Bingshuan's voice rang out. He looked at Yang Gungri and took the initiative to ask for a fight. He had long wanted to kill Nye Tian, but he had never had the chance to do so. Now that the opportunity was here, how could he let it go? Yang Bingxian had seen Nye Tian's strength with his own eyes, and he had even fought with Nye Tian in the sky illusion and was killed by Nye Tian. To be honest, he was a little afraid of Nye Tian. However, his battle with Nye Tian was in the sky illusion after all, and his realm was suppressed to the same level as Nye Tian. Therefore, he felt that if it was in a normal environment, Nye Tian would definitely not be a match for him. Bingxian stepped down. However, unexpectedly, Yang Gungri looked at Yang Bingxian and waved his hand. He sneered and said, There's no need to use a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. He's just a martial artist with the transcendent sword physique. There's no need for you to personally take action. Yes. Yang Bingxian froze for a moment, then understood something and bowed back. He knew that Yang Gungri didn't want him to make a move because he was uncertain about Nye Tian and wanted others to test Nye Tian's strength first. On the other hand, Yang Gungri didn't want him to expose his strength. After all, in the next sword seal in the sky, there would be a peak duel between swordsmen. If he exposed his strength too early, it would undoubtedly be very disadvantageous to Yang Bingxian. Kid, I will soon let you know the consequences of killing my Yang family's people. Yang Gungri's heart turned cold as he spoke. After which, he glanced at the crowd and shouted, Everyone listen up, if anyone dares to kill Nye Tian, I will accept him as a direct disciple and personally teach him the way of the sword. Really? As soon as Yang Gungri's voice fell, everyone's eyes trembled, and their eyes instantly became fanatical. No one would have thought that in order to kill Nye Tian, Yang Gungri would actually offer such generous conditions. Yang Gungri was a guardian of the sky, and his strength in the way of the sword was unfathomable. To be able to become his direct disciple was something that countless swordsmen dreamed of. Moreover, with Yang Gungri's identity, becoming his direct disciple meant that he would soar in the future, and even leave the sky swordsman to enter the holy world. Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless frowned. Obviously, they didn't expect that Yang Gungri would not hesitate to pay such a high price to kill Nye Tian. If I can become the direct disciple of the Guardian, I will do anything. If I become the direct disciple of the Guardian, I will be able to do whatever I want in the Sky Swordsman. I wonder who will be so lucky. Nye Tian looks weak, but he is actually very strong. Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun have fought with him before, but they couldn't defeat him. As the crowd discussed among themselves, their gazes constantly shifted to and fro on Nye Tian's body. They really wanted to kill Nye Tian and become Yang Gungri's direct disciple, but Nye Tian was too strong, so strong that most people would shrink back. Then, the crowd fell silent. No one actually stood out. Yang Gungri was stunned. He didn't expect it to be like this. Was the condition of becoming the direct disciple of the Guardian not tempting enough? At this moment, Nye Tian smiled faintly and looked at Yang Gungri provocatively. Lord Guardian, it seems that your condition is not tempting enough. Are all of you useless? Yang Gungri's face was so gloomy that it looked like it was dripping blood. The eyes of the crowd trembled. Some people were eager to try, and they clearly couldn't hold back anymore. Let me. At this moment there was a low roar and a burly swordsman stood out. His eyes shone with ferocity, and his aura was extremely violent. Make your move. Nye Tian looked at that person, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He was very disdainful. This swordsman was only at the transcendent esoteric realm, and it was not enough for him to take him seriously. You're courting death. Feeling Nye Tian's disdain, the swordsman roared. His body moved, and a heavy sword appeared in his hand. He suddenly slashed out, and a sword shadow that was like a mountain fell down towards Nye Tian. Nye Tianling stood in the air, and his expression was so calm that it was infuriating. Swish! In the next moment, Starlight Slash appeared in his hand, and he stabbed out. A sharp sword shadow whistled out, and it was extremely murderous. Bang! Then, the huge sword shadow in the air actually collapsed under the impact of the sharp sword intent. Then, there was a muffled sound, and the swordsman's body flew out like a kite with a broken string, leaving a trail of blood in the air. One sword, just a casual sword strike, and Nye Tian directly injured this challenger. Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them, and they sucked in a breath of cold air. They were speechless for a long time. It seemed that after coming out of the illusion in the sky, Nye Tian was even more terrifying than before. Yang Gungri frowned, and his expression became even more unsightly. The corners of his mouth could not help but twitch. Nye Tian's strength far exceeded his expectations. Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless eyes trembled, and they were very passionate. Especially Eternally Merciless, his expression was almost fanatical. He had not chosen the wrong person. Nye Tian must be the person he needed. With this kind of strength, you dare to challenge me? You are asking to be humiliated, Nye Tianling said coldly. His gaze swept across the crowd, and he said in a loud voice, "Next, who dares to fight? Who dares to fight?" Nye Tian was actually very violent and insolent. With his strength, he was enough to kill that person. He only seriously injured that person, which could be considered very merciful. As his insolent voice fell, the scene was dead silent, and no one responded for a long time. Once again, they witnessed Nye Tian's strength, and no one dared to step out casually. A bunch of trash. After a while, Yang Bingxian stepped out, and with one step, his entire body's aura was extremely violent, and it almost shattered the void. No one else dared to step out, so he had to do it himself. And he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Chapter 3364. Demon Fox exposed. It's Yang Bingxian. He's going to make his move. Everyone exclaimed when they saw Yang Bingxian. Both Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun had fought Nye Tian before, but neither of them had been able to defeat him. Both of them were in the top 10 of the Sky Sword list. Yang Bingxian was ranked third and was much stronger than Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun. Therefore, he had a high chance of defeating Nie Tian. Yang Bingxian, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Nie Tian looked at Yang Bingxian and said with a cold smile. He knew that Yang Bingxian would definitely make his move. As long as he could defeat Yang Bingxian, the others wouldn't dare to make a move. Nie Tian, you're dead. Yang Bingxian looked at Nie Tian with killing intent. Frost floated around him, as if he was going to freeze the space around him. His relationship with Nie Tian wasn't as simple as killing his father. He saw Nie Tian as a disgrace. This was because Nie Tian was the one who threw him out of the illusion in the Sky Sword list, causing him to lose face in front of everyone and become a laughing stock. Today, he would prove to everyone that he, Yang Bingxian, was far stronger than Nie Tian. Bingxian, don't underestimate your opponent. At this moment, Yang Gengri suddenly stepped forward and reminded Yang Bingxian. He felt an extraordinary power in Nie Tian's body. This power even made him fearful and dangerous. He even had a bad premonition that something bad would happen to Yang Bingxian. Grandfather, don't worry. If I can't even deal with a divine sword physique, how can I be worthy of my surname? Yang Bingxian said in a deep voice as he stared at Nie Tian. He was like an iceberg that would freeze everything in the next moment. Yang Gengri's heart sank when he heard Yang Bingxuan's words. Yang Bingxuan's confidence didn't give him confidence. Instead, it made him even more uneasy. Make your move. At this time, Nie Tian took a step forward and said in a cold voice, "This battle between us will determine the victor and the loser, and also determine life and death. The hatred of killing my father is absolutely irreconcilable." Yang Bingxuan's eyes twitched as he said, "I, Yang Bingxian, must kill you today. I'm afraid you don't have the ability." Nie Tianling sneered, extremely insolent. Arrogant. Yang Bingxuan's eyes were like that of a wild beast, releasing an ominous glint. With a roar, the Frost Whisper Thousand Hunter appeared in his hand. Suddenly, the chill in the air became even more terrifying. Boom! Yang Bingxuan's sword aura surged crazily, attacking the void as if it was going to tear the sky apart. Die! In the next moment, Yang Bingxian roared, his figure moved and a sword slashed out. Suddenly, the chill in the void intensified, condensing into a sword of ice in the air, causing the void flower to tremble, and the space within tens of thousands of meters was directly frozen. Yang Bingxian is so strong, worthy of being ranked third on the Sky Sword list. The eyes of the crowd trembled, extremely shocked. Yang Bingxuan's strength made them tremble. Although Yang Bingxian was blasted out of the sky illusion by Nie Tian, that was after all. His sword's strength was suppressed. Under normal circumstances, would Nie Tian still be a match for Yang Bingxian? 9 limits of starry sky, sun extinguish. At this time, Nie Tianling stood in the void, the corner of his mouth twitched, his whole body's sword intent surged out, the void trembled together, and an extreme killing sword shadow appeared, facing the Frost Whisper sword. In an instant, Nie Tian directly activated the Sky Evolution Saint Soul, stimulating the sword intent in his body to the extreme, the transcendent profound meaning realm. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. In the next moment, the void space suddenly trembled. The two sword shadows were like two ancient beasts, colliding together. Suddenly, the sword intent and coldness exploded. The space was filled with frost and sharp sword intent. Boom, boom, boom. The faces of the crowd trembled, seeing the wild waves in the void. A burst of sword intent hit the void, raging wildly. It was extremely terrifying. The figures of Nie Tian and Yang Bingxian were submerged in the endless wild waves. After a moment, the chaotic void returned to calm, and two figures appeared. It was Nie Tian and Yang Bingxian. The two of them were like two giant swords, standing in the void, releasing an incomparably fierce aura. In the sword collision just now, they were actually evenly matched. This After seeing the two figures clearly, the crowd gasped, feeling incredulous. Nie Tian actually blocked Yang Bingshuan's sword. How is this possible? Yang Gungri was high in the sky, his eyes trembled violently, and he actually exclaimed excitedly. He didn't expect that Nie Tian would be no weaker than Yang Bingxian in a head-on confrontation. One must know that Yang Bingxian, as the existence ranked third on the Sky Sword ranking, had the realm of the 7th level of Sword Aura. As for Nie Tian, he only had the Transcendent Sword Body realm, but he had used a certain method to forcibly raise his realm to the Transcendent Profound Meaning realm. How could a swordsman at such a realm contend against Yang Bingxian? Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless were both shocked, their eyes trembling, surprised by Nie Tian's strength. The Sixth Sky was stunned for a long time before he reacted. In such a short time, his comprehension of the sword intent is so fast, it's simply terrifying. Nie Tian's comprehension and control of the sword intent far exceeded the Sixth Sky's expectations. Nie Tian's power of understanding was so terrifying that it made one's hair stand on end. In fact, it was all thanks to the Eternal Night Demon Fox that Nie Tian was able to comprehend the mysteries of the sword intent in such a short period of time. The Eternal Night Demon Fox and his divine sense were interlinked, and the powerful mental power affected him, allowing him to comprehend the three talents' sword formation much faster. It was precisely because of this that his control of the sword intent reached a shocking level. In the illusion in the sky, Nie Tian absorbed some of the sword intent, allowing his strength to improve, and his combat power to increase a lot. Nie Tian, I'll kill you! At this time, Yang Bingxian roared, his eyes bloodshot, and his figure moved in an instant. Shuang Yuqian soon streaked across the air, charging towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian was not afraid at all, and also attacked angrily. Bang bang bang! Thunderous roars resounded continuously in the void. Waves of violent energy exploded unceasingly, causing the heavens and the earth to tremble unceasingly. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian and Yang Bingxian exchanged more than a dozen swords, but they were still evenly matched. The crowd's expression was dull. They did not expect the battle between Nie Tian and Yang Bingxian to reach this point. Damn it! At this time, Yang Bingxian roared, obviously furious. His whole body surged with a terrifying aura that surpassed before, and suddenly the void was filled with a bloody smell. In order to kill Nie Tian, Yang Bingxian did not hesitate to self-ignite his blood qi to fight. Come on. Nie Tian sneered, and the battle intent in his eyes became more intense. Yeah. At this time, the little demon fox in his arms seemed to sense something, suddenly called out, and poked out its furry little head. That's... Yang Gungri, who was high up in the sky, happened to see this scene. His pupils suddenly shrank, and he let out a cry of shock. His old face was lifeless, and after a long time, he stuttered in his heart, the demon fox of eternal night. Chapter 3365. When Yang Gungri saw the small head in Nie Tian's arms, his expression froze. Then his eyes became extremely passionate. He was about to lose his mind. The eternal night demon fox. He couldn't believe his eyes. What he saw was actually the eternal night fox, one of the 9 great demonic beasts of the primordial era. How could Nie Tian have an eternal night demon fox, and a cub at that? In the next moment, Yang Gungri suddenly thought of something. His pupils suddenly shrank, and he was terrified. He took the eternal night burning god. The eternal night demon fox was one of the 9 great ancient demon beasts. It had absorbed the demonic power of the ancient demon beast. It was a unique existence, and it was impossible for another one to appear. After a long time, the 9 great ancient demon beasts had become legends. The eternal night burning god was obtained by the ancestors of the Yang family a long time ago. The Yang family used to be a great force, but it later declined. After a few changes, the eternal night burning god fell into Yang Gungri's hands. Yang Gungri looked through countless ancient books and finally found a piece of information. The Burning God curse could activate the Eternal Night Burning God. Therefore, he secretly asked Yang Sun to cultivate the Burning God curse, and the cultivation method was to plant the Burning God curse on the swordsman, using the swordsman's divine sense and sword intent to increase the power of the Burning God curse, and then let the Eternal Night Burning God absorb it, in an attempt to activate the Eternal Night Burning God. But for a long time, there was no movement from the Eternal Night Burning God, as if the hidden power had disappeared. At this moment, Yang Sun actually saw the Eternal Night Demon Fox on Nie Tian. How could he not be excited? Nie Tian killed Yang Sun, and he must have taken the Eternal Night Burning God. But Yang Gungri couldn't figure out why Nie Tian could activate the Eternal Night Burning God. Oh no! At the same time, Nie Tian's face darkened, and he exclaimed in his heart. He didn't expect the Eternal Night Demon Fox's sudden action, and seeing Yang Gungri's reaction, he immediately understood that the Eternal Night Demon Fox had been exposed. The person behind Yang Sun was Yang Gungri, so the Eternal Night Burning God belonged to Yang Gungri. Of course, Yang Gungri understood the importance of the Eternal Night Demon Fox. Yeah. At this moment, the little demon fox cried out again, as if it had sensed something. Nie Tian frowned slightly as he looked at Yang Bingxian, who was surrounded by surging blood qi. He immediately understood that it was Yang Bingxuan's blood qi that made the little fox excited. The people of the Yang family had been nourishing the Eternal Night Burning God with their bloodline power for generations. Yang Bingxian was no exception. He had tried many times to stimulate the Eternal Night Burning God with his bloodline power, but he had always failed. However, the little demon fox remembered Yang Bingxuan's bloodline power, so it was very excited when the latter ignited his blood qi. QL 11-inch Nie Tian die. At this time, Yang Bingxian let out a furious roar. The sword intent around his body, under the stimulation of his blood qi, reached an unprecedented momentum, incomparably violent. The surrounding space was filled with a terrifying chill, bone-chilling cold. He did not notice the demon fox of Eternal Night. Even if he had noticed it, he might not have recognized it. Boom! In the next moment, Yang Bingxian slashed down with his sword. The void suddenly trembled, and the endless cold power in the void instantly condensed into a frost sword. It was extremely huge, like an iceberg. The space within tens of thousands of meters was filled with frost and snow, and the cold air was extremely cold. The cold air raged crazily, and the space was filled with sharp ice blades. Nie Tian felt the strangling power coming towards him. His eyes slightly narrowed, and the blood qi in his body surged. A terrifying aura flowed through his body, allowing him to release an extremely sharp sword aura. Yang Bingxian was not the only one who had the power of bloodline. Nie Tian also had the power of bloodline, and it was even more terrifying than Yang Bingxian. Yang Bingxian, your bloodline power is not stronger than mine. Today, I will destroy you with the heavenly Tao. Nie Tianling stood in the air, and the sword intent of his body skyrocketed to the extreme. His eyes were filled with a cold light as he said coldly. Boom! In the next instant, the starry sky slash descended from the sky. It was the move of defying Saint Heaven, earth and man as one, stars and moon sink. A torrential sword shadow filled with blood appeared, like a waterfall of light descending from the sky. The entire sky seemed like it was going to be split apart by this sword shadow. This sword was Nie Tian's strongest move. The sword move was the earth and man become one, and the sword intent was the celestial demon sword intent that was infused with the power of the heavenly Tao under the stimulation of blood qi. The power that erupted in an instant was enough to destroy heaven and earth. At this moment, everyone felt the impact of the sword intent coming from the void. Their expressions were trembling, and they were extremely shocked. No one thought that the power that Nie Tian erupted after burning his blood qi would be so terrifying. It was even more terrifying than Yang Bingxuan's. Zhong Mingyu, eternally merciless, and the others who were high up in the sky, although their expressions remained calm, the trembling in their eyes undoubtedly showed the shock in their hearts. When eternally merciless first met Nie Tian, he could see how terrifying the latter was. However, he did not expect that Nie Tian could actually grow to this extent in such a short period of time. In the past, Nie Tian was a peerless genius in his eyes. But now he felt that Nie Tian was completely a demon, a monster. Apart from shock, there was another emotion in Zhong Mingyu's eyes. That was surprise. He knew that he did not find the wrong person. Nie Tian was the person he was looking for. Boom! At this moment, in the void, two sword shadows collided head-on. The void suddenly trembled, the earth shook, and dark clouds rolled. It was a scene of doomsday. Boom, boom, boom. Endless violent forces collided in the void, forming a terrifying wave. It was like a wild beast that devoured and drowned everything. The terrifying impact caused everyone's eyes to tremble, and their hearts to be filled with astonishment. Boom. Crack, crack, crack. A moment later, a loud explosion could be heard. Following that, the ice sword that was like an ice mountain suddenly broke apart and shattered into pieces. In an instant, streams of thousand-seed frost chi were unleashed, freezing the entire area. Everyone felt the impact of the cold chi and retreated. But in the next moment, the sword intent surging with blood chi rushed over. The space was filled with sharp chi and the sword radiance revealed a sharp killing intent. No. Yang Bingxian suddenly felt the aura of death approaching. His eyes trembled and he screamed in horror. However, it was too late. He did not have any time to resist. His small figure was covered by the huge sword shadow and instantly drowned. Not even his bones were left. The sword shadow fell with a whistling sound. The terrifying sword intent surged tens of thousands of meters away. The whole place was dead silent. Countless pairs of eyes stared at Nie Tian with indescribable shock in their hearts. A sword Dao genius from the Holy World, an expert ranked third on the Sky Sword ranking, was killed by a sword just like that. Such a scene was too terrifying. Nie Tian took a step forward and said coldly, "You can't even withstand a single blow." His arrogance was even fiercer than his sword intent. As soon as his voice fell, everyone's eyes trembled. No one dared to speak. Chapter 3366. Divine Heaven Ancestor? The entire place was dead silent, making Nie Tian's arrogant voice even sharper. At this moment, everyone's gazes shifted to Yang Gengri. Yang Bingxian was killed by Nie Tian. This was something Yang Gengri never thought would happen. His son was just killed, and now his grandson was killed in front of him. Such a heavy blow made him go crazy. Yang Gengri stood in the air, his eyes red and trembling. The muscles on his face were trembling, the blood in his heart was trembling, and his entire being was shaking. Everyone could see that he was trembling with rage. "You killed Yang Bingxian." In the next moment, Yang Gengri finally exploded. Like a wild beast that broke out of its cage, he roared and his sword intent surged crazily into the void. The heaven and earth trembled as if the entire world was about to collapse. "I will kill you!" Then, Yang Bingxian roared and moved. The sword intent around him broke through the void and turned into an infinite amount of power that slammed down. At this moment, the void trembled and the wind and clouds dimmed. Waves of frenzied killing intent swept over, enveloping Nie Tian. Yang Gengri lost control of his anger and directly attacked Nie Tian. Everyone's eyes trembled and their hearts trembled. "Stop!" However, at this moment, a low roar of anger rang out. After that, a terrifying sword intent gushed forth, transforming into a gigantic net of swords in the air, radiating a towering might as it pressed towards Yang Gengri. Boom! In an instant, Yang Gengri's sword intent was suppressed by the sword net and could not be used. Immediately after, his sword will was directly imprisoned and instantly restrained, disappearing into nothingness. This The crowd's eyes trembled and their faces stiffened. They looked at the person who attacked, Zhong Mingyu in the first sky. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. Yang Gungri's terrifying sword intent was actually suppressed by Zhong Mingyu. The latter's strength was unimaginable. Zhong Mingyu, don't stop me. Yang Gungri spun around and looked up at the first sky. His eyes were trembling as he called out Zhong Mingyu's name. Yang Gungri, what are you trying to do? Zhong Mingyu's expression was grim and cold. I'm going to kill this brat. Yang Gungri roared. The aura around his body was berserk, as if he was about to go berserk. Kill Nye Tian? Zhong Mingyu smiled coldly. Have you forgotten what I, the sky, just said? You can't attack. He killed my son and then he killed my grandson. Don't tell me I can't avenge my grandson? Yang Gungri's eyes turned even redder. No. Cold, Zhong Mingyu replied. Do you want me to go back on my words in front of everyone? Zhong Mingyu, you. Yang Gungri's teeth were chattering, and his face was so gloomy that it looked like blood would drip from it. Don't tell me that in your eyes I, Yang Gungri, am less than a sword slave from another realm? Yang Gungri didn't expect that Zhong Mingyu was willing to fall out with him for the sake of Nye Tian. Zhong Mingyu's expression darkened and he said cold, Yang Gungri, I'll say it again. You can't kill Nye Tian. He actually wanted to say that Yang Gungri was indeed not as important as Nye Tian. It was true that Yang Gungri was the guardian of the sky, but to Zhong Mingyu, Nye Tian was more important. He was giving Yang Gungri face by warning him. If Yang Gungri didn't know what was good for him and insisted on killing Nye Tian, then he would have no choice but to kill him. In order to protect Nye Tian, Zhong Mingyu didn't hesitate to kill Yang Gungri. In the battle just now, he saw Nye Tian's talent. He would definitely be in existence that could amaze the sky martial competition this time. He even felt that Nye Tian had a chance of ascending to the top of the sky and becoming the Lord of the Sky. And he protected Nye Tian not just because of this, but because Nye Tian had another identity to him, making him have no choice but to protect. Whoever wanted to kill Nye Tian would have to get past him. Zhong Mingyu, first. You. Yang Gungri's face trembled, feeling as if there was a mountain pressing down on his chest, making him unable to speak. Zhong Mingyu's unyieldingness was beyond his expectations. He was very curious why Zhong Mingyu was so protective of Nye Tian. Even if Nye Tian's talent was powerful, it was also not to the extent where it could make Zhong Mingyu be so unscrupulous. Zhong Mingyu and this kid must be related. Yang Gungri was even more convinced of his previous conjecture in his heart as he said fiercely in his heart. He even felt that Nye Tian killing Yang Sun and seizing the Eternal Night Burning God were all arranged by Zhong Mingyu behind the scenes. After all, everyone wanted something like the Eternal Night Burning God. Unfortunately, he had guessed wrongly. Zhong Mingyu simply did not know what the Eternal Night Burning God was. Unfortunately, he had guessed wrongly. Zhong Mingyu simply did not know what the Eternal Night Burning God was. Among the 7 protectors of the Sky Sword Martialist, Zhong Mingyu was ranked first, and his strength crushed the other 6. Although Yang Gungri was ranked second, compared to Zhong Mingyu, the difference was like night and day. Phew! Eternally Merciless secretly let out a breath of turbid air when he saw Yang Gungri calm down. However, he was also very curious as to why Zhong Mingyu was so protective of Nye Tian. He had once mentioned Nye Tian to Zhong Mingyu because he had discovered that Nye Tian's sacred heaven-defying sword had a trace of similarity to Zhong Mingyu's sword technique. However, he did not expect Zhong Mingyu to care so much about Nye Tian. Yang Gungri secretly looked at Nye Tian. His eyes were incomparably sinister, emitting a cold and blazing light. In fact, he did not care too much about Nye Tian killing Yang Sun and Yang Bingxian. What he cared about was the Eternal Night Demon Fox in Nye Tian's body. He could ignore his son and grandson, but he had to obtain the Eternal Night Demon Fox. He did not believe that Zhong Mingyu could always protect Nie Tian. Yang Gungri, the matter between you and Nie Tian ends here. If you dare to harm Nie Tian, don't blame me for falling out with you. Zhong Mingyu knew that Yang Gungri was dissatisfied, so he swept a cold glance at the latter and directly threatened him. Yang Gungri's old face was gloomy, and he did not reply. Wan Heng, bring everyone. Let's go. Zhong Mingyu no longer cared about Yang Gungri. He suddenly looked at the sixth sky and called out his name. Yes, teacher. Wan Heng of the sixth sky nodded slightly, very respectfully. When Nie Tian saw this scene, he could not help but be stunned, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. He did not expect that Wan Heng of the sixth sky was actually the disciple of the first guardian, Zhong Mingyu. Wan Heng looked even older than Zhong Mingyu, but he was actually the latter's disciple. This was strange. At this moment, Nie Tian was thinking about another question, Zhong Mingyu's identity. Wan Heng had said that he had been entrusted by someone to protect Nie Tian. Nie Tian had been wondering who the person behind Wan Heng was. The person he most wanted to think of was eternally merciless, but he felt that it was not very likely. Now that Wan Heng's teacher, Zhong Mingyu, had appeared, he could not help but suspect that the person behind Wan Heng was Zhong Mingyu. What surprised Nie Tian even more was that he felt a familiar aura from Zhong Mingyu's sword intent. Just now, when Zhong Mingyu suppressed Yang Gungri, although it was only for a moment, the sword intent that erupted clearly carried the aura of the Trinity Holy Array. Trinity Holy Array. Chapter 3367. Chapter 3362. The sword platform in the sky. The number 1 sword cultivator in the sky protector Zhong Mingyu, was the sky emissary, the divine heaven ancestor? Nie Tian's eyes trembled and his expression changed. Even he himself was shocked by this conjecture. The divine heaven ancestor, judging from the name, should be an old monster that had lived for countless years and not the young swordsman in front of him. Zhong Mingyu shouldn't be the divine heaven ancestor. After a while, Nie Tian became cold and thought to himself. Even though Zhong Mingyu was very strong, the sword intent that Nie Tian sensed was not the pure sword intent of the 3 talents. Thus, he felt that the possibility of Zhong Mingyu being the divine heaven ancestor was not high. Next, under the guidance of Zhong Mingyu and the other 2 sky protectors, everyone flew up into the sky. The sword seals in the sky formed a world of their own. The higher they went, the stronger the sword intent became. Nie Tian sensed that the space in the sky was even vaster than before, as if it were boundless. Next, everyone passed through a secret formation and entered the inner world. After entering the secret realm, Nie Tian immediately felt that the pressure in the surrounding space was even stronger. Then, he began to observe the surroundings and felt the strong sword intent. In the next moment, his gaze was attracted by a huge Dao platform in the sky. This Dao platform had a radius of hundreds of thousands of meters. It floated in the sky like a floating mountain. Outside of the Dao platform, there was a mysterious halo that released an ancient and mysterious aura. Nie Tian examined it with rapt attention and discovered that numerous magical symbols could be seen swirling around it. The sword intent it emanated was exceptionally strong, vigorous, and incomparably fierce. Everyone's gaze was also attracted by the huge Dao platform, and they were extremely shocked. Everyone, the Dao platform you are looking at right now is called the sword platform in the sky. The following martial competition in the sky will be held on it. At this time, Zhong Mingyu's deep and powerful voice resounded in everyone's ears. The sword platform in the sky. Everyone's eyes trembled and immediately became excited. So the martial competition in the sky was actually held on the sword platform in the sky. The sword platform in the sky is the core of the sky swordsmanship. The reason why the entire swordsmanship in the sky can be supported is because of the sword platform in the sky. Zhong Mingyu looked up at the huge sword platform with eyes full of shock. So that's how it is. The hearts of the crowd were shaken and their eyes became even more excited. The following Haotian martial arts competition would be held on the Haotian sword platform. Whether or not every swordsman present could become famous would be decided on the Haotian sword platform. The sword platform in the sky didn't look like much. Why was it able to support the entire swordsmanship in the sky? Zhong Mingyu's gaze swept across the crowd and saw everyone's doubts, but he didn't answer. Instead, he said, "The sword platform in the sky is mysterious and unfathomable. Above the sword platform is the sky, and the sky is divided into 9 heavens. As long as you can step onto the 9th heaven of the sky, you will be able to pluck the heart of the sky and become the master of the sky." The heart of the sky, the master of the sky. When everyone heard Zhong Mingyu's words, their eyes trembled even more and they were already ready to make a move. Although they didn't know what Zhong Mingyu meant by the heart of the sky and the master of the sky, everyone could tell that it was definitely something terrifying. It's a good thing that you want to become the master of the sky, but you have to act within your abilities. Zhong Mingyu's gaze swept across everyone and said coldly. Every time the beautiful sword seal was opened, it was unknown how many geniuses died on it. The sword discourse arena in the sky in front of them was actually the burial ground of countless genius swordsmen. Everyone was stunned for a moment. Of course, they could hear the warning in Zhong Mingyu's words. Immediately, the blood in their hearts dimmed a little. "Follow me." At this time, Zhong Mingyu's figure moved, approaching the sword discourse arena in the sky. Everyone followed, wanting to feel the aura of the sword discourse arena in the sky at a close distance. A moment later, everyone arrived below the sword discourse arena in the sky. Nie Tian looked at the sword discourse arena in the sky and felt an extremely strong pressure. He saw that many of the weaker swordsmen had not even ascended the sword discourse arena in the sky, but their faces were already flushed red and their auras were unstable. At this moment, the corner of Zhong Mingyu's mouth twitched, revealing a bitter smile as he said in his heart, "The sword discourse arena in the sky is not something that just anyone can ascend." The swordsmen of the sword martial in the sky were all sword Dao geniuses that had been carefully selected from the various realms. And the 10,000 swordsmen present were selected from over 500,000 swordsmen. They could be said to be geniuses amongst geniuses. But among these people, it was already not bad if even half of them were able to step foot on the sword discourse arena in the sky. Just ascending the sword discourse arena in the sky was already so difficult. The difficulty of ascending to the 9th level of the sky in the sky could be imagined. However, everyone was still very excited at this moment as they looked at the sword discourse arena in the sky with incomparable anticipation. If they could shine brightly on the sword discourse arena in the sky, then their glory would be limitless. "Lord Guardian, can we ascend the sword discourse arena in the sky now?" At this time, someone could no longer hold it in and asked eagerly. "Don't worry, the sword discourse arena in the sky hasn't started yet." Zhong Mingyu replied indifferently, "We still have to wait for someone." Wait for someone? Everyone was stunned for a moment, their faces filled with astonishment. The swordsmen of the sword martial in the sky were almost all here. Why were they still waiting for someone? Could it be that there were people from the outside world coming to the sword martial in the sky? When Nie Tian heard Zhong Mingyu's words, he frowned and said in his heart, "Could it be that father and the others have come to the sword seal in the sky ahead of time?" After the sword seal in the sky opened, Nie Tian had not seen Nie Fenghua, nor had he seen Bailey Xingxue. He felt that it was strange. There was no reason for the two of them to be absent from the competition in the sky. From the looks of it, it seemed that Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue had long since entered the sword seal in the sky. Following that, everyone waited quietly. "First Lord in the sky, it's about time. We should be able to open the sword discourse arena in the sky." At this time, Eternally Merciless came to Zhong Mingyu's side and whispered, "Yes." Zhong Mingyu nodded his head, and then his gaze became resolute. He formed a sword seal in his hand and raised it towards the sword discourse arena in the sky. The sword seal was like a ray of light as it landed on the halo barrier outside the sword seal in the sky and disappeared after entering. Then, a miraculous scene happened. On the sword discourse arena in the sky, sword images rose one after another. This scene was extremely strange. It was as if a small tree had drilled out from the ground and was growing towards the sky. After a while, the entire sword discourse arena in the sky was covered with sword images. However, these sword images were not big, only 1 meter long. The distance between each other was very uniform, and there were about 5,000 sword images. What are those things? Everyone looked at the sword shadows with shocked expressions, and they asked curiously. This is the sword seed in the sky. It is the tool for you to ascend to the sky. Zhong Mingyu said in a clear voice. With a wave of his hand, a vast force surged out and entered the sword discourse arena in the sky. Chapter 3368. Chapter 3363. Chapter 363 Demon Palace Ghost Prison. How magical! Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. Their eyes trembled and they were incomparably shocked. After a while, 9 halos appeared on the sword discourse arena in the sky. In the air, there were 9 layers. It was the 9 heavens in the sky. The sword discourse arena in the sky is filled with powerful restrictions that suppress martial artists greatly. The martial artists' origin spirit meridian will be sealed, and even the power of their bloodline will be sealed. At this time, Zhong Mingyu's voice sounded out and he said solemnly. This. Everyone's pupils constricted, and their expressions turned ugly. If even the power of their bloodline was sealed, then how could they reach the top of the sky after stepping onto the sword discourse arena? The sword discourse arena in the sky does not suppress the sword intent. At this time, Zhong Mingyu's voice sounded out, if you want to reach the top of the sky, you must rely on your own sword intent to stimulate the sword seed in the sky, and let the sword seed in the sky grow. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and they immediately understood. They all looked at the sword seed in the sky above the sword discourse arena. Everyone felt that the sword seed in the sky was limited, so they had to be the first to enter the sword discourse arena in the sky and snatch the sword seed in the sky. Zhong Mingyu's face was indifferent. He knew that 5,000 sword seeds in the sky were enough. Of the 10,000 swordsmen present, only 5,000 could enter the sword discourse arena in the sky. They should be back soon. I wonder who the 7 Ultimate Devil Palace and the Ghost Prison Sect will send to participate in the competition in the sky? Zhong Mingyu looked up into the sky and frowned. The people he was waiting for were the people from the 7 Ultimate Devil Palace and the Ghost Prison Sect. The 7 Ultimate Devil Palace and the Ghost Prison Sect were 2 great demon clans. It was unknown what methods they used to obtain the qualifications to participate in the competition in the sky. This time, the swordsmen of the Sky Sword Martial Competition would compete with the swordsmen of the 7 Ultimate Devil Palace and the Ghost Prison Sect. Boom! Just at this moment, the void trembled a little as a gap appeared in the sky. A group of figures then walked out from within. The crowd was shocked. They had never thought that someone would be able to tear through the void and arrive at the sword mark in the sky. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 figures appeared in front of everyone. The 2 people in the lead were 2 black-robed old men. Their auras were extremely powerful. One of them was skinny and had a hawk nose and wolf eyes. He looked ferocious and extremely sinister. As for the other person, he had a stooped figure and was leaning on a dragon-headed walking stick. He was trembling as he stood, causing others to worry that he would be blown away by a gust of wind. 7 Despair Devil Palace's Absolute Eagle King, Ghost Jail Sex Gui Tongren, it's actually the 2 of them. When Zhong Mingyu saw the 2 black-robed old men, his eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He was secretly shocked. He didn't expect that the 7 Ultimate Devil Palace and Ghost Jail sect would actually place so much importance on the competition in the sky, letting Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren come. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren were Sword Dao experts of the 7 Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect respectively. They had been famous for a long time and their strength was terrifying. The fact that the 2 of them were personally participating meant that the 7 Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect placed great importance on the competition in the sky. Behind the Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren, there were several young swordsmen. Among them, the most eye-catching were a blind swordsman and a purple-haired swordsman. The blind swordsman had an eye patch wrapped around his eyes as he stood behind the Absolute Eagle King. Although his eyes were covered, the sharp aura around his body couldn't be concealed. Especially the sword intent that was faintly circulating around his body. It was incomparably sharp, as though it could tear everything apart. As for the purple-haired swordsman, he stood behind Gui Tongren. He had a handsome face and pale skin. His eyes were filled with a cold glint as he constantly scanned the area below as though he was searching for something. Nie Tian's gaze swept across the blind swordsman and the purple-haired swordsman, and he was slightly shocked. He sensed that the sword intent aura of the blind swordsman and the purple-haired swordsman was much stronger than Yang Bingshuan's. However, their age seemed to be lower than Yang Bingshuan's. This undoubtedly meant that the sword Dao talent of these 2 was far above Yang Bingshuan's. At this moment, the 2 black-robed elders descended. Their eyes shone with a sharp light as they stared at Zhong Mingyu. Absolute Eagle King, Lord Gui Tongren, I didn't expect the 2 seniors to come personally. I hope this junior can forgive me for not welcoming you earlier. Zhong Mingyu took a step forward and said faintly as he bowed to the Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren respectfully. After all, these 2 were his seniors. Nephew Mingyu, it's been a long time since we last met. Your sword realm has improved by quite a bit. The Absolute Eagle King laughed as he took a step forward. Brother Ju, compared to Nephew Mingyu, it's time for us 2 old bones to enter the grave. Gui Tongren followed up with a fake smile. Seniors are overpraising me. Zhong Mingyu laughed as he focused his gaze on the blind swordsman and the purple-haired swordsman. He asked, these 2 little brothers have extraordinary sword intent. It seems like they are sword Dao geniuses from the 7 Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect. Haha, not really geniuses, just a bit of talent. The Absolute Eagle King laughed as he looked at the blind swordsman. His name is Zhu Qing, the number 1 sword Dao genius of the 7 Despair Devil Palace in a million years. He is already more than 1,000 years old and his sword realm has reached the 9th layer of sword rhyme. It's passable. The 9th layer of sword rhyme. Zhong Mingyu's eyes narrowed slightly before he laughed and said, it's passable indeed. More than 1,000 years old and the 9th layer of sword rhyme. It's not just passable, it's simply a monster among monsters. The Absolute Eagle King was clearly showing off by saying this. His name is Gui Jiaozi, my last disciple. He is a few years older than Nephew Zhu Qing, and his sword realm is the same as Nephew Zhu Qing. Gui Tongren smiled as he glanced at Gui Jiaozi. There's a 9th layer of sword rhyme. Zhong Mingyu frowned as he glanced at Gui Jiaozi. Both Zhu Qing and Gui Jiaozi were very young, but their sword Dao strength was very terrifying. In the entire Sky Sword Marshals, perhaps only the number 1 on the Sky Sword list could compare to Zhu Qing and Gui Jiaozi. At this time, Zhong Mingyu couldn't help but look at Nie Tian with a frown. In his eyes, Nie Tian's talent wasn't any weaker than Zhu Qing and Gui Jiaozi, but Nie Tian's sword Dao realm was too far behind these 2. Does Nie Tian have the ability to compete with Zhu Qing and Gui Jiaozi? Zhong Mingyu couldn't help but worry. Senior Zhu, Senior Gui, where are our Sky Sword Marshals? At this time, Zhong Mingyu suddenly thought of something and his expression slightly changed as he looked at the Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. You mean those who went to greet us? The corner of the absolute Eagle King's mouth twitched as he sneered and said, "Don't worry, they will be here soon." Soon? Zhong Mingyu's expression sank as he couldn't help but worry. Of the 7 great sky guardians, 3 stayed in the Sky Sword Marshals while the other 4 brought some geniuses from the Sky Sword Marshals to greet the absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. Now, the people from the 7 Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect had arrived, but the people from the Sky Sword Marshals had yet to return. This gave Zhong Mingyu a bad premonition. Boom! At this time, the void trembled as a gap appeared in the sky and a group of figures walked out. "They're back!" Zhong Mingyu's eyes trembled as he looked at the people in the sky with surprise. But the next moment, when he saw the group of figures clearly, his expression changed. Chapter 3369. Chapter 364. Chapter 364. Who killed them? They're injured. Zhong Mingyu looked at the 4 sky protectors and his expression suddenly changed, becoming extremely ugly and gloomy. The 4 sky protectors had gone to welcome the people from the 7 Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect, but did not return with them. Now that they had returned, they were actually injured. How could Zhong Mingyu not be angry? Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren saw Zhong Mingyu's reaction, but their faces were gloomy, the corners of their mouths pulled into a cold and mocking smile. First Protector. At this time, the 4 sky protectors brought the people over and looked at Zhong Mingyu, their faces ugly as they shouted. "What's going on?" Zhong Mingyu's face was extremely gloomy. He growled, not caring about Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren at all. "This." One of the protectors' face was extremely ugly. He stammered, unable to speak. "Speak the truth." Zhong Mingyu growled, his body surging with a sharp sword intent, faintly forming sword blades in the air, as if they were going to tear the void apart. That protector had a difficult expression. He could not help but look at Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. His eyes filled with fear. "You've returned to the Sky Marshal sect. What else can't you say?" Zhong Mingyu was even angrier. He growled. A pair of cold eyes swept across Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. There was no longer any respect. Replacing it was a low and restrained anger. "Nephew Mingyu, why are you so angry? If you want to know what happened, just ask me and brother Gui." At this time, Absolute Eagle King smiled sinisterly, a playful expression on his face. It was very provocative. "Fine." Zhong Mingyu growled. He suddenly turned and stared straight at Absolute Eagle King. "Then let me ask Absolute Eagle King, my Sky Marshal sect people went to welcome you, why were they injured? Isn't that simple?" Absolute Eagle King did not speak. Gui Tongren stepped forward. "They were injured because they are useless, because they are trash. Can you blame anyone else?" "Gui Tongren, what do you mean by that?" Zhong Mingyu's expression suddenly turned cold. His eyes were filled with killing intent. "Isn't eyes meaning clear?" Gui Tongren replied with a sneer. "Your Sky Marshal Sword sect sent people to pick us up. Shouldn't we test the strength of these people? You sent a bunch of trash to pick us up. Do you expect them to have a good ending?" After saying that, Gui Tongren sneered arrogantly. "So you're saying that they were injured by you?" Zhong Mingyu's expression darkened even more. His cold gaze swept over Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren as he spoke gravely. "That's right." Absolute Eagle King laughed and looked provocatively at Zhong Mingyu. "Cold?" he asked. "Zhong Mingyu, do you want to stand up for them?" Zhong Mingyu's face was gloomy as he swept his gaze over the 4 guardians of the sky. Only then did he realize that out of the dozens of swordsmen who had gone with the guardians of the sky, only a dozen or so had returned. Moreover, all of them had pale and ugly expressions, having suffered serious injuries. "Where are the others?" Zhong Mingyu looked at one of the guardians and asked coldly. That guardian's expression stiffened. He clenched his fists tightly and said 2 words in a hoarse voice, "Dead." "Dead?" When Zhong Mingyu heard these 2 words, His pupils shrank and killing intent surged out. He never thought that the people from the Seven Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect would actually dare to kill the swordsman of the Sky Martial Sword sect. On the other side, Nie Tian's gaze was gloomy as he locked his gaze on two people from afar. Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue. Nie Tian, Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue had indeed entered the Sky Sword Seal in advance. Moreover, they were chosen to accompany the four guardians of the sky to welcome the people from the Ghost Jail sect. However, at this moment, Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue's expressions were very ugly. They were as pale as paper. Moreover, the blood in their bodies was unstable. It was obvious that they had suffered heavy injuries not long ago. Nie Tian suppressed the anger in his heart. He did not stand out and only watched from afar. Compared to those who had died, Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue were considered to be luckier. Who killed them? At this moment, Zhong Mingyu, who had been suppressed for a long time, finally exploded. With a roar, a terrifying sword aura appeared and surged out violently. The impact caused the void to tremble, as if the heaven and earth were about to collapse. At this moment, Zhong Mingyu was really angry. The four great guardians of the Sky Martial Sword sect had gone to welcome the Seven Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect, but they had actually been beaten. Moreover, out of the dozens of swordsmen who had accompanied them, only a dozen returned. If the Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail had only injured the people of the Sky Martial Sword sect, Zhong Mingyu would grit his teeth and endure it. However, the Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail had actually dared to kill the people of the Sky Martial Sword sect. This was an anger that Zhong Mingyu could not tolerate. If the people of the Sky Martial Sword sect had died in the hands of others, as the number one guardian of the Sky Martial Sword sect, he, as the number one guardian of the Sky Martial Sword sect, would do nothing. Then how could he, as the number one guardian, stand in front of the people of the Sky Martial Sword sect? So strong. The instant Zhong Mingyu's sword aura erupted, it actually formed a strong wave in the void, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Everyone was forced to retreat, their eyes looking at Zhong Mingyu in shock. Since when did this guy become so terrifying? Yang Gengri's pair of cloudy old eyes suddenly trembled when he felt Zhong Mingyu's sword aura. His heart was filled with shock. Previously, he had always thought that Zhong Mingyu's strength was at most a little stronger than his, or even a little weaker. After all, Zhong Mingyu was too young, and he had relied on the power behind him to become the number one guardian. However, Zhong Mingyu had previously restrained his sword intent, and now he had displayed such a terrifying sword aura. This made him understand that Zhong Mingyu had the strength to crush him. He should be thankful that he did not kill Nie Tian previously. Otherwise, the person who would have died would not have been Nie Tian, but him. The four guardians looked at Zhong Mingyu in horror, their eyes flickering with fear, not daring to speak. This was the first time they had seen Zhong Mingyu so angry. Although Zhong Mingyu was young, he was very steady. He usually did not smile, and his emotions did not show on his face. At this moment, Zhong Mingyu was so angry, how could the others not be shocked? I ask you, who killed the people of my Sky Sword Martial? Zhong Mingyu's eyes darkened as he looked at the four guardians and asked in a cold voice. It's the people of the Seven Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect. One of the guardians forcefully calmed down and said with a trembling voice. He did not point out the killer, obviously because he was afraid. Absolute Eagle King, Gui Tongren, why did you kill the people of my Sky Sword Martial? Zhong Mingyu's eyes darkened, directly locking onto Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren as he roared. Zhong Mingyu, what is the meaning of this? Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren looked at each other, their faces similarly darkening. They did not expect that Zhong Mingyu would be so angry for a few swordsmen. What is the meaning of this? Zhong Mingyu sneered and said, The people of my sky sword marshal went to welcome you, but you injured the guardians of the sky and tortured and killed the swordsman of my sky sword marshal. Shouldn't I be the one asking you, what is the meaning of this? Devil Palace and Ghost Jail sect are so arrogant. Do you think that the people of my sky sword marshal have no one? Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, Zhong Mingyu took a step forward, and the sword aura around his body actually rose explosively. The violent sword will faintly condensed into a sword shadow in the air, causing his entire person to look like a giant sword that stood towering between the heavens and the earth, sharp and incisive, capable of tearing through everything,